Hi guys, and welcome to History That Makes You Sleepy. Tonight you arrive just a little too late. A thin layer of ash drifts slowly through the air, settling softly on your shoulders, light as snow, but warmer than it should be. You brush it away without thinking, only to notice how quiet everything is. No footsteps, no distant voices, not even the sound of wind. Just a stillness that feels unnatural. You take a slow breath, and there is a faint, bitter taste in the air. It lingers longer than expected. You pause, because something here does not quite make sense, and the more you notice, the clearer it becomes. If you were truly standing here, you would not have time to understand it. You probably would not survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to share your location and local time in the comments. I always enjoy seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights. Flow straight into the story. The white wilderness waits around you broad and silent, as if the world has been wrapped in wool and told not to breathe. The ash keeps falling soft grey specks against the snow, and for a moment your mind tries to make it ordinary. Campfire nearby, perhaps. A village beyond the ridge. Some sensible human explanation, because the human brain does love a tidy excuse before it admits that things have gone sideways. But there is no fire, no smell of cooking, no cheerful crackle, no voices arguing over who forgot the kettle. Just cold air pressing gently against your cheeks and the faint dusty bitterness on your tongue. You stand alone. The snow reaches your shins in places packed hard where the wind has swept it smooth loose and powdery, where it has gathered in quiet hollows. Your boots creak when you shift your weight. It is a small sound, but here it seems almost rude, like coughing in a cathedral. Far away, a line of black spruce leans beneath its burden of snow. Above them the sky's pale and flat, not quite evening, not quite afternoon, a sky with no interest in your schedule. And already the first lesson arrives very politely, like an old schoolmaster tapping a ruler on the desk. Cold wilderness does not begin by attacking you. It begins by asking you to waste time. You want to look around. You want to understand where the ash came from. You want to wait for the wind to change, or for someone to appear, or for the scene to confess what it is. But the cold is patient. Hunger is patient too. Both are excellent at letting you make your own mistakes. In the 19th century, explorers in the Arctic often learned this with painful slowness. The Franklin expedition, which vanished after sailing into the Canadian Arctic in 1845, carried ships, supplies officers, maps and confidence, that most dangerous luxury. Yet even with all that, the ice turns certainty into a very small thing. History is full of people who arrive prepared on paper, and then discover that paper does not keep your fingers warm. You have less than they did. No ship, no party, no fire, no food. Just your body, your clothing, your senses, and whatever the frozen land has not yet taken from you. It is not encouraging, obviously. 5 stars for atmosphere, perhaps. 1 star for hospitality. You take another breath slower this time. The air feels sharp inside your nose. Not painful, yet only clean and thin and dry. Your eyelashes gather tiny crystals when you blink. Somewhere beneath your coat, warmth still lives close to your skin, stored in layers of fabric and movement and the stubborn little furnace of your body. For now you're not freezing. That is important, for now is a powerful phrase out here. You look at your hands. They are still flexible. Your feet still answer when you ask them to move. Your thoughts are still mostly lined up in a sensible row, though 1 or 2 are already wandering off toward panic, carrying tiny suitcases. You let them go, panic can walk by itself. The ash on the snow troubles you. It might be from a distant volcanic event, or a burned settlement, or a forest fire that has sent its last breath into this cold bowl of land. In parts of Iceland, Alaska and Siberia, people have long known that ash can darken snow and make it melt faster under sunlight. That is a mainstream fact, simple and useful. Dirty snow absorbs more warmth than clean snow, but here in this muted light, the ash only makes the surface look older as if winter has been sleeping here for centuries and you have stepped into its room without knocking. There is a strange tidbit from northern folklore that says some travellers once carried bits of soot or charcoal not only for marking trails, but as a charm against losing the path. Whether anyone truly believed the soot itself protected them, or whether it simply gave nervous people something to do with their hands, is harder to say. Humans have always been good at turning practical things into lucky things. A marked tree becomes a promise. A black streak on pale stone becomes a small argument against being erased. You have no charcoal, only ash falling without permission. Historians still argue whether survival accounts from frozen expeditions reveal more about practical skill or about the stories people needed afterward to make fear feel noble. It is a gentle argument on paper, but out here it becomes sharper. If you live, what will you say saved you intelligence luck? A memory of advice half heard years ago. The fact that you did not sit down when sitting down felt heavenly, for now you begin with attention. You listen. The silence is not empty. It has layers. A faint settling of snow in the trees, the soft rasp of your own sleeve against your coat, the low thump of your heartbeat suddenly intimate as if your body has become a small drum in a very large room. There are no birds calling, no running water, no human sound. That absence matters. You turn slowly, careful not to twist an ankle beneath the uneven crust. Behind you, your tracks lead back across a shallow rise and vanish, where drifting snow has already begun to soften them. Ahead, the spruce line offers darkness, wood, and perhaps some protection from wind. To the left, the land opens into a pale basin where snow lies smooth as a blank page. To the right, low stones break through the surface, their tops glazed with ice. Your instincts tug in different directions. Open ground might show you distance. Trees might give shelter. Stones might mean a ridge, a viewpoint, or just the kind of place where you fall and invent several new regrets. You do not yet know where you are. That is frightening, yes, but not the most urgent thing. People love maps because maps are comforting. But the first map is always your body. Are you warm enough? Can you move? Are you injured? Is the weather changing? Is daylight fading? Survival begins as a quiet inventory, not a heroic speech. You pat your pockets. Nothing useful appears by magic, which is inconsiderate. Few scraps, perhaps a bit of cord, a dull metal button, a cloth edge you could tear if you had to. No food, no matches, no lighter, no grand cinematic survival kit with a compass, knife, fishing line mirror, and a conveniently folded blanket that looks suspiciously modern. So you accept the poor little kingdom you possess. Breath, blood, cloth. 2 hands, 2 feet. A mind trying very hard not to be dramatic. The cold presses closer. You begin to walk toward the trees, not fast because sweating is dangerous. That feels unfair, does it not? In ordinary life, sweat means effort, health, maybe a smug fitness watch congratulating you. Here, sweat can turn against you. Moisture trapped in clothing steals warmth when you stop. So you move steadily, gently, as if you are carrying a full bowl of sleep through the snow. Each step sinks, lifts, sinks again. Your thighs begin to feel the work. The air smells faintly of resin as you near the spruce, a dark green scent hidden beneath ice. The trees are not friendly exactly, but they are something. Their branches lower the sky. Their trunks break the distance into smaller pieces. The world feels less endless under them. You pause at the edge of the forest and look back. Already your path is dimming. The ash continues to fall, settling into each footprint like grey breath. You understand now that the wilderness is not a single enemy. It is a set of questions asked slowly, one after another. Where will you place your body? How will you keep heat? What will you believe when hunger starts whispering? Can you read signs that no one meant for you? And most of all, can you stay calm long enough to learn the language of this white world? You step beneath the first heavy branches and snow dusts your shoulders in a soft, cold sigh. The moment you step fully beneath the trees, the world changes in a way that feels almost polite. The wind, which you barely notice before, softens here. filtered through layers of needles and branches. Sound shifts too. Your footsteps are quieter, the snow less exposed, slightly firmer where it has been protected. Even the falling ash seems hesitant, catching on the branches above, before drifting down in slow, uncertain spirals. You stand still for a moment, listening again. It is not silence anymore. Not entirely. There is a faint ticking sound as ice crystals shift in the cold, a delicate creaking from the trees as they adjust to their frozen weight. It reminds you that nothing here is truly still. Everything is just moving very, very slowly. And this is where you begin to understand something important. The wilderness is not empty. It is full of information. You simply have not learned how to read it yet. You look down at the ground beneath the trees. The snow here is uneven, broken in places marked by shallow depressions and faint lines. At first it looks random, like a page scribbled by an impatient hand. But if you soften your gaze, if you stop trying to force meaning patterns begin to appear, a line of small paired marks, close together, light, possibly a rabbit or hare. The prints are not fresh, their edges are rounded, softened by time and a dusting of ash. You crouch slightly, careful not to lose your balance, and study them. In colder regions, animals conserve energy by following established paths sometimes called runs. This is a well-known fact among naturalists. Small mammals often reuse the same routes, compacting the snow and making movement easier. It is efficient, predictable, and if you're paying attention, useful. You straighten slowly, feeling the pull in your legs. Useful does not mean easy. You're not hunting. You're not even close to that stage. But knowing something has passed through here means life exists nearby. And where there is life, there are patterns. And patterns can be understood. There is a faint indentation to your right, longer, more irregular. Perhaps a fox. Perhaps something larger. The spacing between the marks suggests a steady, purposeful walk. You imagine the animal moving through the same space, head low nose, working entirely at home in a place that feels quietly hostile to you. A strange, almost comforting thought slips in. You're not the first to walk here today. There is an old and slightly odd belief recorded in parts of northern Europe that following animal tracks could lead a lost traveller to safety, not because animals intended to guide humans, but because they avoided the worst terrain. Whether this was ever consistently true is questionable. Animals also lead each other into danger all the time. But the idea lingers, a small piece of folk logic that says, if something can survive here, perhaps you can learn from its choices. Historians still debate how much traditional wilderness knowledge was based on careful observation versus hopeful storytelling passed down through generations. When your life depends on it, the difference matters. Out here, you cannot afford comforting myths that lead nowhere. You take a few careful steps deeper into the trees, paying closer attention now. The ground slopes gently downward. You had not noticed that before. The angle is slight but consistent. Snow has drifted differently along this incline, forming shallow ridges where the wind once pushed across the surface. Wind leaves clues. It shapes snow into patterns called sastrugi, hard, wave-like ridges that point in the direction of prevailing winds. You notice faint versions of these here, less dramatic under the trees but still present. Their orientation suggests that stronger winds come from behind you, sweeping toward the open basin you saw earlier. That is useful. If wind is stronger in the open, then staying within the trees offers protection. If you later need to build shelter, you will want to consider this direction. Even without a compass, the land is quietly telling you which way the cold prefers to travel. You brush your glove lightly across the surface of the snow. The top layer is dry, almost powdery, but beneath it is a firmer crust. This layering tells a story of changing conditions, perhaps a brief thaw, followed by a deep freeze or shifting winds compacting certain layers. Snow is not just snow, it is a record. In fact, scientists who study snowpack can read its layers much like tree rings, identifying periods of melting, freezing and snowfall. While you're not here to conduct research, the principle still applies. The ground beneath you has memory. And if you learn to notice it, that memory becomes guidance. You move slowly, letting your eyes adjust to this new way of seeing. The trees are not evenly spaced. Some cluster together, others stand apart. In the denser patches, snow is thinner, interrupted by fallen branches and the occasional exposed root. In the more open gaps, drifts gather deeper, softer, more treacherous. You test each step before committing your weight. One misstep into a hidden hollow could twist an ankle, and out here a simple injury becomes something much larger, much more final. There is a faint smell now sharper than before. Resin, yes, but also something slightly metallic. Cold has a way of sharpening scents, stripping them down to their essentials. You inhale slowly, trying to place it. Nothing immediately alarming, no smoke, no decay, just the raw, clean scent of frozen wood and earth locked beneath ice. Your body is still warm enough, but you notice a subtle change. Your fingers feel slightly less responsive, not numb, not yet, but slower, as if each movement requires a bit more persuasion. This is how cold begins its quiet negotiation. It does not seize you all at once. It makes small requests. A little less sensation here, a little more stiffness there, a gentle suggestion that maybe you should stop moving just for a moment, just to rest. You ignore it. Instead, you keep walking, maintaining a steady pace, not fast enough to sweat, not slow enough to cool down. It is a delicate balance, one that experienced Arctic travellers learn through trial and error. Many early expeditions suffered not just from lack of supplies, but from misunderstanding how to manage their own body heat. Too much effort and clothing became damp. Too little and warmth faded. You pass a fallen branch half buried in snow. Its surface is coated in ice, smooth and glassy. You reach out and touch it briefly. The cold bites instantly sharper than the air. You pull your hand back, flexing your fingers. Even small contact with exposed cold surfaces can drain heat quickly. It is a simple fact, but one that becomes very real, very fast. Ahead, the trees thin, slightly opening into a small clearing. The snow here is undisturbed, a smooth, pale expanse broken only by a single dark protrusion, a rock perhaps, or a stump. The ash has settled more thickly here, giving the surface a faint grey tint. You stop at the edge considering. Open spaces offer visibility. You can see further, assess your surroundings, but they also expose you. To wine to cold, to whatever might be watching, though so far nothing has shown itself. You glance back again, a habit forming now. Your tracks are still visible, but softer, less defined. The forest is already beginning to reclaim your passage. There is something quietly unsettling about that. Not threatening exactly, just indifferent. The wilderness does not chase you. It does not need to. It simply continues unchanged as you move through it. Your presence is temporary, your impact minimal, and yet here you are trying to read its language one small sign at a time. You step into the clearing. The snow compresses beneath your weight with a soft, muffled crunch. The air feels colder here, more exposed. You can sense the difference immediately, like stepping from a sheltered room into a drafty hallway. You move toward the dark shape at the centre. As you approach it, resolves into a low, weathered stump, its top flattened and coated with a thin layer of ice. Around it, the snow dips slightly, suggesting that wind has swirled here, carving subtle patterns. You circle it slowly, scanning the area. No fresh tracks, no obvious signs of recent activity. Just space. You lift your gaze beyond the clearing. The trees continue on the other side, dense and shadowed. The sky above remains pale, unchanged, offering no hint of time passing. And for a moment you feel it again, that quiet, creeping awareness. You are alone here, but you're not blind anymore. You are beginning to see. The clearing does not invite you to stay. It simply allows you to notice how exposed you are. Cold feels sharper here, more direct, as if it has stopped being polite now that the trees are no longer buffering its approach. You stand beside the stump, and for a moment your body suggests something very reasonable. Stop. Rest. Think it through. It sounds wise. It sounds calm. It sounds like the kind of advice people give in warm rooms. But the first hour in a frozen wilderness is not really about thinking. It is about choosing correctly before your body starts making decisions for you. You shift your weight again, gently keeping your muscles active. Already you can feel how easy it would be to stand still just a little too long. The cold is subtle like that. It does not shout. It suggests. In many historical accounts of Arctic survival, the earliest mistakes were not dramatic. They were small pauses, a moment to gather thoughts, a short rest that stretched just a bit too long. Explorers wrote about it later, those who made it back describing how the cold seemed to soften urgency. One British naval report from the 1800s noted that men would delay building shelter because the weather felt manageable. It often was, right up until it wasn't. You glance across the clearing again. The open ground gives you visibility, yes, but it also drains heat faster. The trees darker and denser ahead promise some level of protection. Not comfort exactly, but less exposure. Your mind starts assembling options, a quiet list. Keep moving forward. Try to find a better location. Maybe water, maybe signs of human presence. It is the instinct to explore to solve the problem outward. Or stop here. Begin shelter immediately. Use what you have, what you can gather, and accept that staying alive tonight matters more than finding anything else. Or, and this is the one your brain offers in a softer voice, just wait a little longer. Maybe conditions will change. Maybe someone will come. Maybe the situation will reveal itself if you are patient. You already know which one is the trap. Waiting feels safe because it requires less effort. But cold environments punish passivity. Energy is not just something you spend, it is something you must manage carefully. Every minute you stand undecided is a minute your body is quietly losing heat. Historians still argue whether the greatest danger in early polar expeditions was lack of preparation or overconfidence in delayed action. Some suggest that well-equipped teams still failed because they hesitated at critical moments, choosing comfort over urgency. It is a difficult thing to measure hesitation, but its effects show up clearly in outcomes. You take a slow breath. The air's colder now, or maybe you are noticing it more. Your fingers flex inside your gloves slightly stiff. Not numb yet, but slower, as if they are considering each movement before agreeing to it. That is enough of a signal. You step away from the stump and move toward the far edge of the clearing back into the trees. Not quickly, not urgently, but with intention. Each step is placed carefully, your pace steady, controlled. Movement is heat. That is a simple, reliable truth. Your body produces warmth when you use it. Muscles working, blood circulating, breath deepening. As long as you keep that balance moving enough to stay warm but not enough to sweat, you maintain a fragile advantage. There is a lesser-known historical tidbit about early Siberian travellers who sometimes used a method called micro-resting. Instead of stopping completely, they would slow their pace significantly for short intervals, allowing partial recovery without letting their bodies cool too much. It is not quite rest, not quite movement, more like negotiating with your own limits. You try something similar now. Your pace eases, then resumes a gentle rhythm forming. Step, breathe, step, breathe. The trees close around you again, and the wind fades to a distant presence. The ground here slopes slightly upward, the snow thinner in patches, where roots and fallen debris interrupt its surface. You notice how your steps become easier in these areas, less resistance, less energy required. That matters. Energy is now a currency you cannot waste. You have no way to replace it with food. Every unnecessary movement, every extra step is a small withdrawal from a very limited account. You begin to choose your path more carefully, favouring firmer ground, avoiding deep drifts where possible. It is slower but more efficient. Your breathing remains steady, your body still warm enough to function without complaint. For now, you glance upward through the branches. The sky has not changed much, still pale and indifferent. It offers no clear sense of time passing, no comforting shift toward evening or relief. In high-latitude regions, daylight can behave strangely, stretching or compressing in ways that confuse even experienced travellers. Without a clear sun position, it becomes difficult to judge how much time you have before darkness. And darkness here is not just an inconvenience, it changes everything. Without light reading, the terrain becomes harder. Moving safely becomes uncertain. The cold often deepens as temperatures drop further. Night is not an enemy, but it is a multiplier of every other challenge. So your first hour matters, more than you might expect. You pass another set of tracks, these slightly deeper, more defined, perhaps more recent. You pause briefly studying them. The spacing suggests a medium-sized animal moving at a measured pace. Not running, not fleeing, just existing. You feel a brief flicker of something like reassurance. Life continues here. The environment, while harsh, supports movement, survival, routine. But you're not part of that routine yet. You move on. Your shoulders shift beneath your coat, adjusting the layers slightly. You become more aware of how your clothing sits against your body. Any gaps, any exposed areas become points of heat loss. You tuck your chin, slightly minimizing the space where cold air can slip in. Clothing is not just protection, it is strategy. Historically indigenous Arctic populations developed layered clothing systems using fur wool and natural fibers that trapped air effectively. This trapped air acts as insulation, slowing heat loss. European explorers unfamiliar with these techniques often wore materials that were less effective in extreme cold, leading to faster heat depletion. It's a quiet reminder that knowledge, not just equipment, determines survival. You continue moving your path, weaving gently through the trees. The forest feels less overwhelming now, more readable. You notice subtle changes, denser clusters, slight openings, variations in snow depth. You are learning. And then a new thought arrives, not urgent but persistent. Where will you stop? Because you cannot keep moving forever. Not without food, not without a clear destination. At some point you will need to choose a place, commit to it, and begin the slow work of making it survivable. That decision is coming soon. You slow your pace slightly, scanning ahead for signs. Not just tracks or terrain, but something more specific. A natural windbreak. A depression in the land. A cluster of trees dense enough to offer real protection. Shelter. Not comfort, not warmth in the way you're used to, but something that reduces exposure, that holds onto the heat your body produces, that gives you a chance to endure the coming hours. The first hour is not about solving everything. It is about not making the mistake that ends everything early. You step over a fallen branch, your foot landing on firmer ground beyond it. The snow here is packed slightly elevated. The trees around it are closer together, their branches interlocking overhead. You pause. This could be something. Not perfect, not ideal, but out here perfection is not part of the conversation. You stand there breathing slowly, feeling the cold, measuring your own strength. And for the first time since you arrived, you're not just reacting. You are deciding. You choose the cluster of trees because it gives you the first thing the wilderness has offered, freely resistance against the wind. Not shelter. Not yet. Shelter is not a place you find so much as a small agreement you build between your body and the world. These trees are only the beginning of that agreement. Their branches knit overhead in dark, uneven layers, catching snow ash, and what little light remains. The trunks stand close enough to break the open flow of air, but not so close that you cannot move between them. Beneath your boots, the snow is shallower, packed around roots and fallen needles. It is not cozy. Cozy is a word for blanket slumps and people who can make tea whenever they like. This place is merely less hostile. For tonight, less hostile is a luxury. You stand still only long enough to look, not too long. You remember the clearing, the stump, the cold little suggestion to wait. That voice is still somewhere nearby, wearing a very sensible coat and giving terrible advice. You begin by checking the ground. A shelter site can save you or it can quietly betray you. Low hollows may seem protected, but cold air often settles there, gathering like invisible water. Open ridges catch wind. Snow beneath heavy branches can collapse if disturbed. You scan upward and see no huge dead limbs hanging above, no cracked trunk leaning at an ominous angle. That is encouraging. Nobody needs a tree deciding to become part of the story at midnight. A widely accepted fact from cold weather survival is simple shelter should usually come before food. A healthy person can often survive days without eating, but exposure can become dangerous far sooner, especially in wind and wet clothing. This is why so many northern peoples, soldiers, trappers and expedition members treated wind protection as urgent work, not glamorous work, not the sort of thing that gets a dramatic painting in a museum, but urgent. Your stomach disagrees. It offers a low, hollow complaint as if it has read none of the survival manuals. You place one hand briefly over your middle and keep working. Food will have to wait. You need to trap air. That's the secret, not magic, not bravery. Air. Still air held close protected from moving wind. Your clothing works because it traps air. Snow can insulate because it traps air. Branches can help because they slow air down. The whole problem becomes strangely domestic, really. You're not conquering the wilderness. You're trying to persuade a tiny pocket of warmth to remain near you for a few more hours. You look for fallen branches. Some are half buried beneath the snow brittle and stiff. Others hang low from the spruce already dead, their needles gone or brown. You gather what you can without wandering too far. Every trip away from the chosen spot costs energy and attention. You move in small circles, always keeping the shelter site in view. The work is slow. You pull one branch free, then another. Snow slides off in soft sighs. Needles brush your sleeves. Resin scent rises faintly when a twig snaps sharp and almost sweet. It is a strangely beautiful smell for a place that is otherwise trying to turn you into a cautionary anecdote. You arrange the larger branches, first leaning them against the base of several close trunks to form a low-sloping barrier. Not a cabin, not even a proper hut. More like a windbreak with aspirations. It is awkward at first. Branches slip. Snow collapses where you kneel. Your gloves catch on rough bark. Still the shape begins to appear. A wall on the windward side, low enough to hold, thick enough to slow the air. You add smaller branches across the gaps, weaving them where you can. Then snow, carefully. Not packed too hard, because tightly compressed snow loses some of its insulating quality, but firm enough to hold against the branches. You scoop with your hands, push with your forearms, use your boots to nudge snow into place. There is an old curiosity from parts of the boreal north. Some travellers believe that speaking softly while building a night shelter helped keep fear from waking the cold. It sounds poetic, possibly nonsense, and also rather charming. Maybe the cold does not care about your tone of voice, but speaking softly does change your breathing. It steadies you. It keeps panic from becoming the loudest person in the room, which is useful when the room is made of trees and regret. So you murmur a little, not words exactly, just breath shaped into sound. Easy now. One branch, one handful, one small improvement. Researchers continue to disagree about how much of traditional survival behaviour came from tested practice, and how much from ritual comfort. In truth, the two may have been tangled together more often than modern minds like to admit. A ritual that calms the body can become practical. A habit that began as superstition can preserve attention. Out here, usefulness is allowed to wear strange clothing. The windbreak grows. When you crouch behind it, you feel the difference immediately. The air still moves, but less. The cold remains, of course. It has not gone off to bother someone else. But it no longer slides across you with quite the same confidence. You next prepare the ground. Lying directly on snow is a bad idea, one of those ideas that seems obvious only after you have suffered from it. Snow steals heat by conduction. Your body warms the surface beneath you, melts it slightly, and then that moisture helps draw warmth away. A charming system if you're a snowbank, not ideal if you're you. You gather boughs from lower branches, taking only what comes away without too much effort. You do not have tools, so you cannot cut cleanly. You twist small dead limbs free and collect fallen needles where they have gathered near trunks. You build a rough mattress, layering branches with needles facing upward, then crossing another layer above it. The goal is not softness, though. Softness would be nice. The goal is separation. You want distance between your body and the frozen ground. Your hands ache now, not badly but steadily. Your fingers feel thick in the gloves, less precise. You pause to tuck them under your arms for a short moment, warming them against your body. Then you move again. The light is fading in a way that is difficult to measure. The trees seem darker. The snow has lost some of its brightness. Shadows gather beneath branches, blue and grey and soft at the edges. You work faster, but not frantically. Frantic movement wastes heat and invites mistakes. You remember that from the first hour. You remember that ash in your footprints, the way the land began erasing you almost as soon as you passed. That memory keeps you focused. The wilderness is patient. You must be patient too, but not idle. You crawl into the low space behind your windbreak to test it. It is cramped. Your knees press close. Your shoulder brushes a branch and a small shower of snow slips down the back of your neck. Lovely. Truly luxurious. Somewhere perhaps a travel brochure is being written by a liar. But it works. A little. The wind is reduced. The ground feels less brutally cold through the branches. The trees overhead catch some falling ash and snow. You can curl your body to conserve warmth, drawing your knees toward your chest, keeping your head covered as much as possible. You're not warm. Warm is too ambitious. But you are less exposed. That is survival often enough, not victory, reduction. You make one more round, adding snow along the windbreak's base ceiling gaps, where you feel air sliding through. You press loose branches into weak places. The wall becomes thicker, darker, more real. As you work, your breath drifts in pale clouds, vanishing almost instantly. At last you stop, not because the shelter is finished. It is not finished. It will never be finished in the way a house is finished. You stop because continuing would cost more than it gives. That is another judgment the wilderness asks you to make. When is enough truly enough? You crouch behind the wall and listen. The forest is dim now. The ash still falls quieter than snow, a grey softness passing through the branches. Your stomach is empty. Your fingers ache. Your feet are tired. But the wind no longer reaches you directly, and the branches beneath you hold your body just above the frozen ground. You have made a small pocket in the cold. A poor little shelter. A ridiculous shelter, perhaps, but yours. And as evening gathers around the trees, you understand that surviving alone here will not depend on one grand moment of courage. It will depend on these small, unimpressive acts repeated carefully while fear waits nearby and pretends to be wisdom. You settle lower behind the windbreak, saving movement, saving heat, saving the decision about what comes next. Snow becomes different once you stop treating it as scenery. Until now it has been the floor of your trouble. It has swallowed your boots, hidden roots, softened tracks, brightened the world, and reminded you with every step that nature has many ways to be inconvenient without seeming rude. But here behind your small windbreak, with twilight gathering in the trees, snow begins to look less like emptiness and more like material. A strange material, certainly, cold, unstable, changeable, and deeply uninterested in your comfort. Still, it is material. You reach out and scoop a little into your gloved hands. The top layer is loose and dry, a pale powder touched by drifting ash. Beneath it the snow is denser. You press it gently. It does not form a solid ball at first, only crumbles apart. Too cold, perhaps, or too dry. That matters. Wet snow can pack easily, but it also chills you faster. Dry snow can insulate well, but only if you use it with care. The old idea that snow is always deadly cold is only partly true. Snow can steal heat if you lie directly on it, yes. Yet because it traps air, it can also protect against harsher temperatures outside. This is why snow shelters from simple trenches to igloos have mattered across Arctic and subarctic history. Inuit builders famously shaped snow blocks into dome structures that could remain far warmer inside than the air beyond the walls. Not warm like a kitchen, let us not get dramatic. But warm enough to make the difference between endurance and disaster. You look at your poor little windbreak. Branches, boughs, packed snow along the base. It is not an igloo. It is not even the igloo's distant cousin who was invited only out of politeness. but it can be improved. You begin adding snow carefully around the outside of the branch wall, not piling it too high, not making it so heavy that the whole thing collapses inward. You build gradually pressing loose snow into gaps using the firmer crust from beneath the surface when you can break it free. The work is quiet. Scoop, place, press, scoop, place, press. Your arms complain, your shoulders feel heavy. Hunger sits inside you like an unanswered question, but the wall thickens. It is oddly soothing, this repetitive labour. The wilderness shrinks to the size of your hands. One small patch, one small repair. No need to think about the whole forest, the darkening sky, the absence of food, or the fact that your current architectural style could be described as desperate woodland lump. You smile despite yourself. A curious tidbit from the history of polar travel says that some European explorers at first distrusted snow houses because the idea of shelter made from frozen water seemed absurd to them. A house of snow sounded like a joke told by weather. Yet when they saw how effective such shelters could be, many had to admit that local knowledge had once again beaten confident ignorance. This happens often in history. Someone arrives with a theory. Someone else quietly survives with a better one. Researchers have long debated how quickly outsiders learned from indigenous Arctic technologies, and whether pride delayed that learning more than lack of information. It is not a small question. People can stand beside wisdom and still freeze if they refuse to recognize it. You luckily are in no position to be proud. You take the wisdom wherever you can find it, even in a memory half formed from documentaries' old books, and the general understanding that people who live with winter know winter better than people who merely visit it. You scrape snow into a shallow bank along the windward side, then curve it slightly around the back of your resting space. A full enclosure would take too much effort and might trap moisture poorly if built badly. But a partial snow wall combined with branches and the trees themselves can slow air movement. That is the goal. Slow the air, keep your warmth near you, let the cold do more work to reach you. Your breath makes small clouds that drift down and vanish. As the air cools further, the smell of resin fades, replaced by the dry mineral scent of snow and ash. You can hear your gloves brushing the surface, a soft, gritty sound. Somewhere deeper in the trees, snow drops from a branch with a muffled thump. You freeze, listening. Nothing follows, only the forest settling. You return to work. The snow around the base of the trees is different. It lies in mounds where branches have shed it mixed with needles and fragments of bark. This dirty snow is less useful for drinking later perhaps, but good for building. The needles help texture it. You pack it around the lower gaps of your shelter, creating a rough seal. Then you turn to your bedding. The bough mattress you made is thin. Better than bare snow, yes, but not enough. You gather more branches from nearby, choosing those with thick needle clusters when possible. You place them under the area where your hips and shoulders will rest, because those points press down hardest and lose heat fastest. You think of your body not as a noble traveller now, but as a lumpy warm object that must be kept off the frozen ground. This is humbling but useful. History is full of people surviving because they stopped imagining themselves as heroes and started managing themselves as mammals. You crawl in again to test the improved space. The entrance is low. You must tuck your elbows and pull your knees close. Snow brushes your sleeve. A branch pokes your thigh in a way that feels personal. But once you settle, the difference is noticeable. The air is still cold but calmer. The snow wall absorbs sound. The world outside becomes softer blurred. You press your palm against the inside of the wall. Cold, yes, but solid enough. For a moment you imagine ancient travellers doing something similar across northern lands. Not always with elegant snow houses, not always with proper tools, but with the same basic understanding. Use the land against itself. Shape cold into a barrier against colder air. Make snow guard the warmth it might otherwise steal. There is something almost sly about it. You're not defeating the wilderness. You're borrowing one of its tricks. The ash continues to fall faintly outside the shelter mouth. It settles on the snow wall, drawing grey freckles across the white surface. You remember the earlier thought about dark snow absorbing sunlight. If daylight returns and the sky clears, ash-darkened surfaces may warm slightly faster. Not enough to save you by itself, nothing so generous, but maybe enough to change crust melt edges, alter tracks. The wilderness is not static. By morning this place may read differently. Morning feels distant. Your fingers are tired now. You tuck them again beneath your arms, letting warmth gather slowly. Your feet flex inside your boots, toes still present. That is good. Very good. You wiggle them gently, not obsessively, because obsession wastes attention too. The shelter has become your small world. Above you, branches knit into shadow. Around you, snow walls muffle the wind. Beneath you, spruce boughs crackle faintly whenever you shift. It smells of needles, cold cloth, and the faint bitterness of ash. You listen to your breathing. In pause out, your body is still making warmth. Your shelter is helping you keep some of it. That is not comfort, but it is hope reduced to its practical shape. Outside, the wilderness stretches in every direction, pale and deep and indifferent. But right here in this cramped hollow of branches and snow, you have made a boundary. Thin, fragile, ridiculous perhaps, yet real. And for now, real is enough. You curl slightly, conserving heat, letting your shoulders relax just a fraction as darkness gathers more closely around the trees, and your snow-made protection settles into the long, quiet work of keeping you alive. Your body begins its bargaining quietly. At first, it is only a stiffness in your fingers, a dull ache in the small joints, a sense that your hands have become less like hands, and more like distant employees doing their best under poor management. You flex them inside your gloves, slow and deliberate. The movement helps, but not as much as you would like. Then your feet join the discussion. Your toes feel present but muted. Not gone, not numb in the frightening way, just less vivid than before, as though someone has turned the volume down. You press them gently against the inside of your boots, one foot, then the other, making sure they still answer. They do. Good. You praise them silently, because out here even toes deserve encouragement. The shelter holds around you in its rough, imperfect way. The spruce boughs beneath your body crackle faintly whenever you shift. The snow wall blocks some of the air. Above you, the branches sag under their white weight, and every so often a sprinkle of powder drifts down, touching your coat like cold dust. The ash is still there, too faintly bitter on the air, mixed now with resin and the dry smell of frozen needles. You are tired, not sleepy exactly. Sleep would be dangerous if it came too deeply too easily, but tired in the slow, heavy way that makes every decision feel padded. Your thoughts move with less sharpness than before. They still work, but they take the scenic route. That is part of the bargain. Cold does not only attack skin, it speaks to the mind. As body temperature drops, judgment can become unreliable. In documented cases of hypothermia, people have made strangely calm but fatal choices, removing clothing, wandering away from shelter, or lying down in the open. This is not because they lacked courage. It is because the brain itself was being chilled into confusion. You are not there, not yet, but you respect the slope. There is a mainstream historical lesson here, and it is a sobering one. During many polar expeditions of the 19th and early 20th centuries, survival often depended less on heroic endurance than on routine checks of the body. Men and women in extreme cold learn to watch one another for signs of confusion, clumsiness, and strange cheerfulness. Alone, you have no companion to say, "Actually, friend, you're making a terrible little decision." You must become that companion yourself. So you check. Can you remember where you are? Not exactly. But you know you are in a tree shelter near a clearing after ashfall with no fire and no food. Can you count backward from 10? You try. 10, 9, 8, 7. Annoying but possible. Can you move your fingers? Yes, though. Stiff. Can you feel your feet mostly? You are still here. A strange old belief from some alpine communities claimed that cold could steal a person's walking soul before it stole the body. The phrase sounds fanciful, maybe even a little theatrical, but it describes something real enough the moment when the will to keep moving weakens before the muscles fully fail. People noticed the pattern long before modern medicine gave it clean names. They wrapped it in story because story was what they had. Modern scholars still dispute how accurately older survival tales describe hypothermia, since many were written after the fact, edited for drama, or shaped by moral lessons. But even if the details shift, the central warning remains steady. Cold changes people from the inside outward. You pull your knees closer to your chest, trying to reduce the surface area exposed to the air. You tuck your hands under your arm again. Your breath warms the space near your collar for a moment, then fades. The temptation is to curl tighter and stop thinking, but you cannot leave your mind unattended, so you give it small tasks. First you review your shelter, windward wall holding, bedding beneath you still thick enough, entrance low, no snow collapse, no heavy branch overhead that looks ready to become a historical footnote. Good. Second, you review your body, finger stiff, feet dull, face cold but not numb, shivering present. That last one matters. Shivering is unpleasant, yes, but it means your body is still producing heat. It is the furnace rattling in the basement, perhaps not elegant, perhaps in need of a stern maintenance review, but still working. Third, you review the next need, water. Not yet, not urgently, but soon. You have snow everywhere, which feels like a joke at your expense. Frozen water surrounds you in quantities so generous they become useless. Eating snow directly can lower body temperature because your body must spend heat melting it. In a warmer situation, with a fire or container, snow becomes easier to use. Without fire, it becomes complicated. You may eventually need to melt small amounts inside clothing or against your body, but that has risks too. Moisture is the enemy wearing a helpful hat. You set the thought aside for now, not forgotten, parked nearby. Your stomach growls again, softer this time. Hunger is not yet the emergency, but it is beginning to change the room. Hunger makes food appear in memory. You think unhelpfully of soup, of bread, of roasted potatoes with salt. Your mind offers a full menu because apparently it has chosen comedy. You breathe through it. Many travellers in cold regions recorded how hunger became less sharp after the first waves passed, turning into a hollow weakness rather than pain. The body begins to draw on stored energy. It slows, it prioritizes, it bargains. You can survive without food for some time, but the cold makes the cost higher. Calories are heat waiting to happen, and you have no way to replace them. The body knows this. It starts making suggestions. Move less, think less, sleep. You answer gently, no. Not forever, just not yet. You rub one hand over the opposite forearm, not hard enough to create moisture or irritation, just enough to remind the body of itself. You shift your feet again. The spruce boughs crackle beneath you. Outside, something tiny drops from a branch. The sound is so small it might have been imagined. You listen. Nothing. The forest remains sealed in darkness and pale ash. You begin to notice that time has changed. Minutes are no longer neat units. They stretch blurfold. In ordinary life, time is managed by clocks, screens, meals, messages, all those little bells humans have invented because apparently the sun was not stressful enough. Here time's measured by sensation, a wave of shivering, a lull in the wind, a toe check, a breath that feels colder than the last. You become intimate with small things, the seam at your cuff, the pressure of your knee against your coat, the scent of spruce beneath your cheek, the faint taste of ash, the sound of your own swallow. Fear is still present, but it has changed shape. Earlier it stood in front of you large and bright. Now it sits beside you quieter, almost companionable. It is not gone. It simply understands that panic would waste energy, so it watches with you. You can live with that, for now your task is to remain capable, not comfortable, not brave in any shining sense, capable. You must keep enough warmth to think enough clarity to choose enough stubbornness to refuse the soft invitation of stillness. Outside, the frozen wilderness continues its enormous silence. It does not hate you. That would require too much interest. It simply offers conditions, and your body answers them molecule by molecule, breath by breath. You tuck your chin deeper into your collar and listen to the small furnace of yourself. It is still burning, faintly, carefully. Enough without fire the night feels older. That is the first thing you notice as darkness deepens around your little shelter. Fire belongs to the human story so completely that its absence feels almost rude. There is no glow to gather round, no crackling centre, no orange light touching the snow and making the trees seem less like witnesses. There is only the dim grey of the ash, the blue shadow of snow, and the black shapes of spruce trunks standing close around you. You imagine a flame because your mind cannot help itself. A small one at first, a match struck behind cupped hands, dry twigs catching, resin snapping, smoke curling upward, the whole world shrinking to a circle of warmth. Then the image fades because you have none of it. No match, no lighter, no dry tinder you can easily ignite, no tool for sparks, no bright little miracle tucked into a pocket. The cold seems to understand this. It moves in softly with the confidence of someone who knows the locks have not been checked. For most of human history, fire was not a luxury. It was heat, light, cooking, protection, signalling, tool-making, gathering place, and psychological medicine all at once. Archaeologists generally agree that controlled use of fire shaped human survival for hundreds of thousands of years, although the exact timing and frequency of early fire use remains debated. By the time people were moving through severe northern climates, fire was already woven into daily life so deeply that a night without it was not merely uncomfortable, it was a serious threat. You feel that now, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a slow subtraction. No fire means no easy warm water. No fire means no drying damp clothing. No fire means no smoke to mark your position. No fire means no heated stones tucked close to the body, no cooked food, no flame to hold your attention through the long dark hours. It means you must survive on insulation movement, judgment and restraint. Lovely little list, very inspiring. Someone embroider it on a pillow, preferably indoors. You curl tighter behind your windbreak, but not so tightly that circulation suffers. You keep your feet moving gently inside your boots. Your toes flex, release flex again. Your hands remain tucked near your torso, stealing warmth from the body's centre. Every movement is small and deliberate. You cannot replace fire, but you can imitate some of what it does. Fire creates a warm centre. You protect your own centre. Fire gathers attention. You give your mind small rhythms. Fire marks time. You count breaths. Inhale, hold briefly, exhale, listen. Your shelter is not silent now. It makes tiny sounds as it settles. A branch creaks. Snow presses softly against the outer wall. Needles rub together with a faint dry whisper. The air smells of spruce cold fabric and the faint bitterness that came with the ash. You cannot tell whether the ash still falls or whether it simply remains everywhere, coating the world like the memory of something burned far away. In old northern households, fire was sometimes treated almost as a living presence. In parts of Scandinavia and the Baltic region, folk tradition spoke of hearth spirits, or household guardians connected to flame and ash. A small ember kept through the night could symbolize continuity, family luck, even the household's soul. It sounds quaint until you sit alone in the cold and realize how much emotional power a little heat can carry. No ember waits for you. Only your own warmth stored under layers of cloth surrounded by snow that can preserve or steal it depending on how wisely you behave. Writers of exploration history continue to debate whether firelessness in survival narratives is best understood as a material crisis or a psychological breaking point. The answer from where you are lying seems to be yes. It is both. The body misses heat. The mind misses reassurance. There is a particular loneliness in darkness without flame. Your eyes have nothing to rest on. They drift from the shelter mouth to the low snow wall, from branches overhead to the pale smear of sky beyond. Shapes shift slightly as your vision adjusts. A stump becomes a crouched figure. A branch becomes a lifted hand. Then it becomes a branch again because you're tired, not haunted. Probably. You smile faintly at that. Humour is not warmth, but it is not nothing. You remember that early travellers sometimes carried tinder in small waterproof containers as carefully as others carried money. Charred cloth, dried fungus, birch bark, resin, rich splinters, all of it mattered. In the boreal forests of Eurasia and North America, birch bark was prized because its oils could help it catch even when conditions were damp. That fact feels almost cruel now. You can picture the curling bark pale and papery, maybe somewhere nearby, maybe not. But without spark or flame, even excellent tinder is only beautiful litter. Still you learn from the absence. Tomorrow, if there is a tomorrow in which you can move, you will look for resources differently. Not just food, not just water, materials. Bark resin dry inner wood stones that might strike sparks if metal appears anything that could turn chance into heat. Survival often depends on noticing future possibilities before you can use them. For tonight the problem is simpler and harder. Stay warm enough, you adjust the entrance of your shelter, dragging one loose branch a little closer to narrow the gap. The movement costs effort, and the cold bites your wrist where your sleeve shifts. You correct the gap, quickly tucking the fabric back down. Then you settle again, making your body small. The snow wall helps, the boughs help, your clothing helps, your still functioning stubbornness helps most of all. You let your breathing become slow but not sleepy. There is a difference. Sleep pulls downward, calm spreads outward. You aim for calm. In the distance you hear a sound, very faint, a soft crack. Perhaps a tree contracting in the cold. Perhaps snow shifting on a branch. Perhaps an animal stepping on brittle crust. You hold yourself still and listen until your ears ache from attention. Nothing follows. The forest has many ways to make one sound and then leave you alone with your imagination. This is frankly inconsiderate but historically consistent. You resist the urge to crawl out and investigate. Curiosity is expensive. Fire would have let you see. Fire would have given you a boundary. Without it, darkness belongs to everything equally, and you are not eager to negotiate with every shadow in the spruce. So you remain. You think of all the human beings before you who measured survival by embers. A traveller waking to stir coals beneath ash. A hunter warming fingers before dawn. A family gathered in a snow-covered dwelling while smoke found its way upward through a small opening. A sailor on an ice-locked ship watching the galley stove like a promise. Fire did not erase cold for them, but it argued with it. Tonight you must argue without flame. Your argument is quiet. A tucked hand, a flexed foot, a wall of snow, a careful refusal to panic, a memory of warmth that hurts a little then steadies. The dark press is closer, but not all the way in. You're still enclosed in your fragile pocket of air. Your body still makes heat. Your mind still marks the difference between fear and fact. No fire burns before you. No golden companion dances on the snow, but a smaller flame remains hidden under your ribs, working silently. You protect that one. You lie still enough to save strength, awake enough to notice danger, and the frozen wilderness waits beyond the shelter mouth as the long night settles around you without a spark. Hunger arrives like someone trying not to wake the room. At first it is only a hollow note beneath your ribs, a soft inward pull that comes and goes. It is not yet pain. It is more like an absence with manners. Your stomach shifts, complains, then quiets again, as if even hunger understands that dramatic gestures are not energy efficient. You lie behind your snow wall and listen to it. No food. The phrase seems simple, almost too simple. In ordinary life, hunger is usually temporary. It belongs between meals, between errands, between one cupboard and another. It is solved by opening a packet, ordering something, reheating leftovers, wandering to the fridge with the hopeful expression of a raccoon near a campsite. Here, hunger is not an inconvenience, it is a clock. Your body has stored energy, yes, it is not helpless. People can survive without food far longer than they can survive without warmth or water. That is a basic survival truth, and a comforting one if handled carefully. But cold changes the arithmetic. In freezing conditions, the body burns more energy to maintain its core temperature, especially if you're shivering or moving through deep snow. Calories become warmth in waiting. Without them, every effort must be questioned. You shift your shoulders against the boughs beneath you. The needles crackle softly. Your shelter smells darker now, more enclosed resin and cold cloth, and the faint dusty bitterness of ash. Somewhere outside the forest makes a small settling sound, then returns to stillness. Food in this place becomes imaginary before it becomes possible. You picture things you should not picture. Thick stew, buttered bread, rice steaming in a bowl, apples, cheese, a ridiculous pastry with far too much cream. Your mind produces them with insulting clarity. You can almost smell them. This is unhelpful, of course, but the brain is not always a tasteful decorator under stress. You breathe slowly and let the images pass. Travellers in frozen regions often wrote about food with surprising tenderness. Arctic journals from European expeditions are full of ration lists, cravings, complaints, and careful calculations. On many 19th century voyages, preserved meat ship biscuit, tea sugar, and pemmican became more than supplies. They became morale itself. Pemmican, made from dried meat fat and sometimes berries, was widely used in North American fur trade and exploration because it was dense in energy and kept well in cold conditions. A small amount could carry a person much farther than bulky food with less fat. You have no pemmican. You have in the grand pantry of your present life snow spruce ash and regret. None of these are famous for their nutritional value. Still, you do not immediately search for food. That is important. The wilderness encourages desperate motion, and desperate motion is expensive. Hunting without tools is fantasy. Digging randomly through snow for edible roots is unlikely, and may cost more energy than it returns. Chewing bark may appear in stories, and sometimes inner bark from certain trees was used historically as emergency food, but identifying, preparing, and digesting it safely are not small matters. You're cold, tired, alone, and not currently equipped to become a woodland salad expert. Sensible restraint may save more life than frantic gathering. A peculiar note from northern food history is that some communities ground inner pine bark into flour during famine, especially in parts of Scandinavia. Bark bread was real, though often associated with hardship rather than choice. Imagine someone offering you a slice and saying, "Good news, it tastes like survival." You would thank them warmly because manners remain important, then perhaps chew with deep philosophical commitment. Modern historians disagree over how often such famine foods were daily necessities, rather than emergency supplements, since written accounts were shaped by class, region, and later memory. What is clear is that people in cold landscapes learn to widen the definition of food when ordinary sources failed. You are not there yet. For now, hunger must be managed, not obeyed. You keep your movements small. You avoid unnecessary shivering where possible by improving your posture, tucking your hands close, protecting your neck. You resist the urge to pace outside the shelter just to feel active. Action can feel like control, but not all action helps. That is one of the crueler lessons of survival. Sometimes the useful thing looks like doing very little, which is deeply annoying for anyone raised to believe productivity solves everything. Your stomach tightens again. You acknowledge it calmly. Yes, I know. No, we are not going berry hunting in the dark. This private conversation with your own body might seem strange in a warm room, but out here it becomes practical. You must separate signals from instructions. Hunger is a signal. It does not automatically decide your next move. The first night without food is rarely the end by itself, but it weakens sleep mood, heat production, and judgment. You feel that possibility waiting ahead. Tomorrow, if you move, your body will draw more heavily on reserves. Your legs may feel slower, your patience thinner, your thoughts more food-shaped. The world may seem crueler simply because you have eaten nothing. Humans like to imagine themselves as pure intellect, but miss one meal, and suddenly the soul has opinions about biscuits. You let the thought make you smile again faintly. Soft humour matters. It loosens fear. It keeps the mind from tightening around one problem until all other problems vanish. Hunger is important, but it is not the only fact. You turn your attention outward. What food might exist here in theory? Small mammals, birds, lichens, inner bark, perhaps insects hidden in deadwood, though winter makes that difficult. Fish. If water can be found and accessed, but without tools, line hook, spear, or firefish remain mostly an inspiring concept. In some Arctic and subarctic cultures, raw frozen fish or meat could be eaten safely within known practices, but that knowledge belonged to people with skill, context, and access. You have none of those advantages. There is another uncomfortable truth. Many survival stories make food gathering sound simpler than it is. They skip the failed attempts, the lost energy, the danger of misidentification. They make the forest seem like a pantry, with bark on the doors. It is not. It is an ecosystem, and you're a guest who arrived without an invitation, a basket, or common sense. Several researchers have questioned whether popular survival narratives overstate individual resourcefulness, while understating local knowledge and social networks. Alone you feel the truth of that. People survived harsh lands not merely because one brave person was clever, but because communities built knowledge over generations. They knew seasonal movements, edible plants, animal habits, weather signs, storage methods, and stories that carried warnings. You have fragments. Fragments are better than nothing, but they are not a culture. Your hunger quiets again, leaving weakness in its place. You notice the difference. The sharp pull fades into a flat emptiness. Your limbs feel heavy, but still usable. Your thoughts remain clear enough. You're not starving, not tonight. You're simply entering the long conversation with absence. Outside, the dark forest keeps its own food chains moving. Somewhere, perhaps under snow, a small animal follows a tunnel packed by repeated use. Somewhere an owl may be listening for the faintest movement beneath the surface. Somewhere a fox might step lightly along a path it knows well, carrying winter in its bones with an elegance you do not currently possess. You do not envy them exactly, or perhaps a little. Mainly you respect them. They belong here. You are learning how much belonging matters. The shelter creaks softly as snow settles against the wall. You draw your knees closer, saving warmth. You decide that food will not command the night. Water warmth, shelter clarity. Those come first. Food can remain a rumour until daylight gives you safer choices. The wilderness offers no meal, no comfort, no bargain, but it gives you one useful lesson in the quiet dark. Not every need becomes the next action. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep deeply, but to rest the mind from images of bread and firelight. Hunger waits inside you, patient, hollow, and real. You let it wait. The tracks return to your thoughts before you return to them with your feet. You lie for a while in the dim shelter, listening to the forest and feeling hunger settle into its quieter shape. Outside, the night is not perfectly black. Snow saves a little light for itself, reflecting what remains from the hidden sky, so the world beyond the shelter mouth glows in pale grey. The trees stand as darker columns. The snow wall curves beside you like the edge of a buried room. Somewhere out there animals have passed. You remember the small paired prints beneath the trees, the longer marks near the clearing, the suggestion of paths made by bodies that understand this place better than you do. Tracks are messages written without any wish to be read. That makes them honest, perhaps, or at least less theatrical than people. Your body wants to stay still. Staying still conserves energy. But stillness has its own dangers. You need to know whether the shelter remains the best place, whether water or safer ground lies nearby, whether animals are using a route too close for comfort. You do not need to roam far. In fact, roaming far would be foolish. The aim is not adventure. Adventure is often what people call a bad decision after it gets a nice painting. So you decide on a small circle. Careful, limited, always keeping the shelter in view. You ease yourself out from behind the snow wall. Cold air touches your face at once sharper than the protected air inside. Your joints resist. Your knees complain as you stand, and for a moment the world seems to tilt slightly, not enough to frighten you, but enough to remind you that hunger and cold are already editing your strength. You pause with one hand on a spruce trunk. The bark is rough beneath your glove. You breathe until your balance steadies. Then you look down. Your own tracks are messy and deep near the shelter, surrounded by scuffs from gathering branches and snow. Beyond that, the forest floor holds older marks. The ash has dusted everything lightly, making fresh disturbances easier to see. Any new print would cut cleanly through the grey layer. That is useful. The ash, unpleasant as it is, has become a kind of witness. A well-known fact from northern trapping and tracking traditions is that fresh snow can preserve tracks with remarkable detail, but wind, sunlight, temperature change, and falling debris quickly alter them. Track reading is therefore partly about shape, partly about age. Sharp edges suggest recent passage. Rounded edges suggest time. Ash adds another clue. If ash lies inside the depression, the print likely predates the fall. If it cuts through ash, something came after. You study the ground like a cautious student. Most marks are softened, old. Nothing large seems to have passed close to your shelter since the ash began falling. That brings a little relief, only a little. Relief should be rationed too. You move slowly around the tree cluster, keeping one hand near trunks when the snow deepens. The forest smells stronger now that you're outside the shelter. Cold resin, dry bark, a faint mineral scent from the snow. The silence feels wide but not empty. Every small sound has edges your boots, compressing crust, fabric, brushing fabric, your breath leaving you in pale clouds. There near a low branch you see the paired prints again. Small animal, likely hare. The pattern is familiar once you know what to look for, larger hind feet landing ahead of smaller front feet. A strange little arrangement that looks backward until you imagine the body moving. The prints run between dense shrubs, then vanish under a sweep of snow beneath branches. You do not follow closely. That would be wasteful, and hare is not about to wait politely while you solve dinner without tools. But the tracks tell you something. This area has cover. Small animals use it. Predators may also pass nearby. Life collects where wind is reduced and shelter exists. Useful, also mildly unsettling. A curious bit of folklore from parts of the Arctic world claim that hares could trick lost travellers by crossing their own tracks and confusing the path. It is easy to laugh at that until you stare at overlapping prints in low light and realise that a hare does not need magic to make you feel foolish. A small animal moving with purpose can create a map more complicated than your patience. Researchers differ on whether such animal trickster stories began as entertainment warning or practical memory aid. Perhaps they were all three. A story about a clever hare may teach children not to trust tracks too easily. It may also make a long winter evening less dull, which is no small contribution to civilization. You continue your circle. Near a fallen log you find another line of prints. These are more delicate, set one before the other with a narrow gait. Fox, perhaps. The ash lies thinly inside them, so they are not new. The animal crossed this space before the falling grey dust covered the forest. It moved toward the open basin or away from it. Direction is difficult in low light. You crouch slightly and look for drag marks, depth pressure, any hint of movement. Your legs tire quickly in the crouch. You rise before stiffness settles too deeply. This is where the danger of tracking appears. The mind wants story. A print becomes an animal becomes possibility. Possibility becomes pursuit. Pursuit becomes distance. Distance becomes lost shelter, sweat, damp clothing, a twisted ankle, or darkness so complete that every tree looks like every other tree. You step back. No, Tracks are for information tonight, not pursuit. That decision feels small, but it is important. It is another refusal. You refused panic. You refused the fantasy of instant food. Now you refuse curiosity when curiosity becomes expensive. You circle farther, but only a little. The shelter remains visible, a low, irregular mound against the dark trees. Its shape reassures you more than you expected. Ugly, yes. Cramped, yes. But it is a known place, and in a frozen wilderness, known places become precious. The snow changes near the edge of the tree cluster. It dips and hardens, suggesting repeated movement or wind scouring. You test it with one boot, firm. A narrow passage between trees continues beyond perhaps a natural corridor, where animals travel because the snow is less deep. If you need to move at daylight, such corridors may help conserve energy. You mark the direction in memory from the shelter mouth slightly right of the leaning spruce with the broken top. Simple landmarks, not perfect, but better than nothing. Another accepted historical fact comes to mind. Many indigenous and local northern travellers navigated not by one grand sign, but by layered memory of small features, wind direction, snow texture, tree growth, animal movement, and seasonal change. A map could be held in the body and senses not only on paper. European explorers often underestimated this, treating landscapes as blank until surveyed. But the land was never blank to those who knew how to read it. You are barely sounding out the alphabet. Still letters are beginning to appear. You return toward the shelter before fatigue becomes clumsy. The cold has sharpened in your cheeks. Your hands ache from being away from your torso. Your breath feels drier. When you crawl back behind the snow wall, the enclosed air seems almost gentle by comparison. Not warm. You're not that fanciful, but less cruel. You settle onto the boughs and tuck your hands close. Your heart beats a little faster from the brief movement, and that warmth spreads through you in a thin wave. You let it fade slowly. What did you learn? No fresh large tracks nearby, small animal roots in the brush, possible fox trail, firmer passage beyond the leaning spruce, shelter still useful, energy cost noticeable. That's enough. The wilderness has not fed you. It has not rescued you. It has not explained the ash or softened the night, but it has given you information, and information is a kind of ration. You store it carefully. Outside, the tracks remain crossing and vanishing through the trees, written by creatures who do not care whether you survive. Perhaps that is why they are worth reading. They owe you nothing, so they flatter you not at all. You close your eyes again, seeing faint marks in snow behind your lids. Not a promise, not a path, but a language slowly becoming less silent. Water is everywhere, and that is exactly the problem. You sit behind your snow wall with the memory of tracks still fresh in your mind, and the pale forest beyond the shelter seems almost generous. Snow lies over roots, branches, hollows, stones, and fallen trunks. It rests on the roof of your little refuge. It fills the clearing behind you. It softens the world in every direction. Frozen water surrounds you like wealth locked in a vault. Your mouth, however, is dry. At first you notice it only when you swallow. Your tongue feels thick, the inside of your cheek slightly rough. The cold air steals moisture from each breath, and the work of building shelter, moving through snow and shivering, has quietly drawn water from you. Thirst in the cold is deceptive. You may not sweat visibly. You may not feel hot. But every breath leaves you as vapor, and your body still needs fluid to move blood, think clearly, and keep warmth circulating. So now the wilderness offers another question. How do you drink snow without letting snow drink warmth from you? Eating snow directly is tempting because it is simple. You could scoop a clean handful, press it into your mouth, and feel the sharp melt across your tongue. But that cold has to become liquid somehow, and without fire the heat comes from you. Eat enough snow, and your body spends precious warmth melting it. Worse, your mouth and throat chill, and you may end up colder while still not truly hydrated. You look at the snow beside your shelter. Clean white beneath grey ash. Some areas are dirty with needles and bark. Others are crusted from pressure. You're beginning to read it not as a blanket, but as a substance with choices hidden inside. A familiar survival principle from polar travel is that dehydration can occur even in freezing conditions. Early Arctic expeditions often struggled with fuel because melting snow or ice for water required time and heat. Crews might be surrounded by frozen water and still ration drinkable liquid. This sounds absurd until you live inside the absurdity for a little while. You cup a small amount of clean snow in your glove and hold it close, not eating it yet. The flakes compress into a fragile lump. Your hand does not warm it much through the glove. You could place snow in cloth near your body, letting body heat melt it slowly, but moisture against clothing is dangerous. A wet layer becomes a thief. A wet glove can become a little cold prison. A damp shirt can turn shelter into punishment. So you move carefully. You search your pockets again, slowly, more thoroughly now. The scraps you found earlier are still there. A bit of cord, the dull button, a folded piece of cloth perhaps torn from a lining or old handkerchief. Nothing like a bottle cup or tin. You turn the cloth over in your fingers. Dry enough. Not clean in any elegant sense, but better than the ash-covered surface. You decide on patience. You scrape away the grey top layer of snow beside you until you reach cleaner white beneath. Then you take a small pinch no more than would fit on a spoon and press it between your gloved hands inside the cloth near your chest, but outside your innermost layer. You wait. Your body heat will soften it slowly while the cloth keeps meltwater from spreading too quickly. This is not efficient. It is almost comically slow. A hummingbird could probably file paperwork faster, but slow is safer. A curious historical note comes from some northern travellers who preferred old blue ice for melting because it yielded more water than fresh snow. Fresh snow contains a great deal of air, which makes it beautifully insulating and annoyingly disappointing when melted. A pot filled with fluffy snow becomes a very small puddle, which feels like a practical joke performed by weather. Dense ice, if available and clean, gives better returns. Unfortunately, you're not holding a pot nor a fire nor a cheerful assistant named Olaf who handles hydration. You press the cloth carefully and touch it to your lips when it dampens. The water is cold, faintly earthy, carrying the taste of fabric and snow. It is not much, barely enough to wet your mouth. Still, your tongue accepts it with gratitude. Small amounts, slowly. You repeat the process. Scrape clean snow. Wrap a little. Warm it close, but not against bare skin. Sip what you can. Do not soak clothing. Do not rush. The method is imperfect, but survival is often a collection of imperfect methods chosen in the right order. Academic discussions remain unsettled about how often historical survival accounts exaggerate thirst, hunger, and cold for dramatic effect, especially when written for readers far from the environment. Yet practical records from expeditions, military manuals, and local traditions agree on the same basic warning water matters even when the world is frozen solid. Dehydration thickens fatigue. It dulls judgment. It makes the body work harder when it can least afford extra work. You feel that truth in the dryness of your mouth. Outside the shelter, the forest holds its breath. The ash has thinned, or perhaps darkness simply hides it now. You shift slightly to reduce pressure on one hip, and the boughs beneath you snap softly. Your shelter smells damp in one small place, where snow has warmed near the cloth. You move it away immediately, letting the moisture stay separate from your inner layers. The balance is exhausting. Everything helps and harms. Snow insulates, snow chills. Movement warms, movement spends energy. Shelter protects, shelter traps moisture. Rest saves strength, rest invites cold. Even water, the most basic gift, arrives wrapped in a warning label written in ice. You take another careful sip. It is enough to ease the roughness in your throat. Not enough to satisfy thirst completely, but satisfaction is not the goal tonight. Function is. You need enough fluid to keep thinking, enough warmth to keep moving, enough discipline, not to turn a problem into 3 problems, because impatience sounded like relief. You think of people who crossed cold regions with sledges and dogs, or on foot beside reindeer, or in small hunting parties moving from camp to camp. They knew where water could be found under ice, how to read river surfaces, how to melt snow efficiently, how to choose fuel, how to avoid wasting heat. Their survival was not a single trick. It was a woven net of knowledge. You hold only a few strands. Still, one strand can matter. You continue the slow melting until your mouth feels less dry. Then you stop before moisture spreads where it should not. The remaining snow you brush away from the entrance, keeping your immediate space as dry as possible. Dryness is warmth's quiet cousin. You must protect it. A light tremor passes through you, a wave of shivering that rises and fades. You let it happen. Your body is working. The hidden furnace under your ribs still burns. You tuck your hands back under your arms and settle against the boughs. You have not solved thirst. You have negotiated with it. That is what this place keeps teaching you. Problems rarely vanish here. They become smaller if treated carefully, or larger if handled badly. The frozen wilderness does not reward dramatic solutions nearly as often as patient ones. Scoop less, move slower, think twice, spend warmth like coin. Beyond the shelter mouth, the snow glows faintly layered with ash and shadow. It is beautiful in the unfair way dangerous things often are. You understand now why snow could save you, weaken you and betray you all in the same hour. You touch your lips with your tongue. Cold water, a trace of cloth, a hint of earth. Enough for now. And in the quiet after that small drink, you listen again to the forest, to your breath, to the delicate settling of snow around your shelter. And you begin to understand that survival is not found in abundance, but in knowing how little can still be enough. Night settles fully, and the forest becomes less like a place than a listening shape. You remain tucked behind your snow wall knees, drawn close hands, resting where your body can lend them heat. The small drink has softened your mouth, but thirst is still nearby, waiting politely for its next appointment. Hunger sits deeper, quieter now, like a hollow room inside you. Cold is everywhere, not violent, not sudden, just present in the way. Stone is present in the way winter has always been patient. The last of the grey light fades from the shelter mouth. Snow still holds a faint glow, but the trees beyond are nearly black. Their trunks stand in rows and broken angles, some straight, some leaning, all of them larger in the dark. Shapes lose their edges. A low branch becomes an animal's back. A stump becomes a person crouching. A fold in the snow becomes a face until you blink, look again, and let it return to being only snow. The mind does this when it has too little information. It completes patterns. It invents company. It turns shadow into story because story feels safer than emptiness. You know this. Knowing helps. A common historical truth from long polar nights is that darkness could be as difficult psychologically as cold or hunger. On Arctic expeditions, winter crews sometimes endured months with little or no sun, and journals often describe low mood irritability, strange dreams and a warped sense of time. People tried to fight it with routines, songs, reading games, meals, repairs, even theatrical performances. They built little islands of human order inside enormous night. You have no crew, no lamp, no book, no harmonium played badly by a cheerful officer with frozen eyebrows. You have only your breath. So you make a routine from that. You count 5 slow breaths, then check your fingers. 5 more, then your toes. 5 more, then listen outside. 5 more, then relax your jaw because you notice you've been clenching it. The routine is tiny, almost silly, but it creates rails for your thoughts to run on. Without rails, they might wander too far. The night seems to grow sounds. A tree cracks somewhere distant, sharp and sudden. You stiffen. Then silence returns. Cold can make wood split or contract with startling noise, especially when temperatures drop quickly. You remind yourself of that. Not every sound is a predator. Not every silence is danger. The forest is allowed to make forest noises without consulting you first, though a little warning would be nice. A soft hush follows, perhaps snow sliding from a branch. Then another tiny sound near the shelter wall, a faint granular trickle. Snow settling. You wait. Nothing moves through the entrance. Your body wants certainty. The night offers none. There is an unusual little belief from some northern communities that whistling at night could call up wind spirits or wandering misfortune. Many cultures have versions of this warning, each with its own flavour of please do not make weird noises after dark. Practical reasons may hide inside the superstition. Whistling can reveal your location, disturb animals, or simply irritate everyone trying to sleep in a cramped winter shelter. Tonight you do not whistle, not because you fear spirits exactly, but because the night already has enough opinions. Some historians question whether old taboos about night behaviour were mainly spiritual beliefs or practical rules preserved through memorable warnings. Perhaps people remembered do not whistle, or the wind will come better than sound discipline, and weather awareness remain advisable. Honestly, who can blame them? The spooky version has better marketing. You let that thought pass through you with a faint smile. Then the smile fades and the dark remains. You realise how much modern life protects people from true darkness. Rooms glow, streets glow, screens glow. Even when you say it is dark, some little device is usually blinking nearby, eager to be useful or annoying. Here, darkness is not the absence of electricity. It is the natural condition of the world when fire and sun are gone. Your eyes adjust as much as they can. You see pale snow-black trunks, the faint curve of your shelter wall. Above, through the branches, a few dim stars appear between clouds, cold and distant. They look less like guidance than pinholes in a vast dark cloth. Still, stars matter. For centuries, travellers used the night sky to navigate across seas, deserts and open plains. In northern latitudes, the North Star could offer direction when visible, though cloud, forest cover and exhaustion could make practical use difficult. You glance upward and wonder whether you could identify it from here. Perhaps, perhaps not. The trees slice the sky into fragments, and you're not eager to leave shelter to become an amateur astronomer with poor survival prospects. So the stars remain beautiful and mostly unhelpful. You settle deeper. The boughs beneath you have compressed under your weight, and one sharp twig presses into your hip. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the wall. The movement sends a cold line down your back, where fabric pulls away from fabric. You correct it quickly, tucking layers close again. Your body has become a small household in crisis. Heat must be budgeted, moisture controlled, repairs made immediately, complaints acknowledged but not obeyed. You are the landlord-tenant furnace and emergency committee. Nobody is happy with management, but the building is still standing. Outside night stretches, your thoughts drift toward people who knew darkness far better than you do. Winter hunters waiting out storms, herders sheltering with animals, sailors locked in sea ice, families gathered in turf houses or log cabins while snow pressed against the roof, prisoners of weather, students of patience. The past is crowded with people who endured nights that had no entertainment, no guaranteed rescue, no quick message sent into the air. They had stories, tools, work one another, and sometimes only stubborn breath. You have breath. You listen to it again, in pause out. The sound becomes almost companionable. A soft rasp through your nose, a faint cloud forming, vanishing. Your heartbeat slows. Fear has not left, but it becomes less sharp when measured against rhythm. Then, from beyond the trees, a long, low sound rises and falls. You freeze. It may be wind moving across the open basin. It may be an animal call distorted by distance. It may be your imagination stretching a small noise into something larger. You wait, every muscle held still, and hear it again, softer this time. A low moan across snow. Wind likely. The direction matches what you learned from the ridges earlier. Air crossing the open ground, slipping through gaps, pressing against the forest edge. Your shelter shivers faintly as a thread of that movement reaches it. You're grateful for every branch you placed, every handful of snow packed into the wall, every awkward choice that made this cramped hollow possible. Night tests work. That is one of its ancient habits. You tuck your chin down and keep counting breaths. You do not sleep deeply, but you let yourself drift near rest, hovering where you can still return quickly. A half sleep, a guarded doze, the kind of rest humans and animals have used for a very long time when safety is uncertain. Images pass behind your eyes, the ash falling in the clearing, the hare tracks, the grey snow, a fire that never existed. A bowl of soup your brain refuses to stop mentioning because apparently it has become a culinary poet. You breathe it away. The darkness does not end, not yet. But it becomes less strange as you remain inside it. You learn its sounds, its pauses, its harmless tricks, and the places where caution still belongs. Night is not kind. It is simply large. You're small within it, but not gone. Behind the snow wall, wrapped in bough scent and cold cloth, you keep your little routine alive. 5 breaths. Fingers. 5 breaths. Toes. 5 breaths. Listen. And somewhere between fear and sleep, you hold yourself carefully through the longest part of the dark. Time slips strangely during the night, as if it has decided to move without telling you how. You drift in and out of shallow rest, never fully asleep, never fully awake. Your breath continues its quiet rhythm, and the shelter holds imperfect but loyal in its limited way. The forest outside does not change much, or perhaps it changes too slowly to notice. A faint light may come and go behind clouds, or your eyes may simply grow used to the dark. It is difficult to say. You begin to understand why people lose track of hours in places like this. Without clocks, without sun, without familiar noise, time becomes something you feel rather than measure. A stretch of stillness might be minutes or much longer. A brief sound might seem to echo across a larger space than it actually does. Your mind tries to impose order, but the wilderness is not particularly interested in your schedule. To stay grounded, you turn again to thought. Not wandering thought, not the kind that leads you back to imagined meals or warm rooms, but structured thought. You begin recalling stories, not for entertainment exactly, but for guidance. The past is full of people who faced nights colder, longer, and more uncertain than this one. Their experiences are not comfort, but they are instruction. One well-known example comes to mind: the endurance of Antarctic explorers in the early 20th century. Men like Ernest Shackleton and his crew survived months stranded in ice after their ship was crushed, relying on careful rationing, shared labour, and constant attention to morale. Their environment was harsher in many ways, but one lesson repeats itself across their journals, and reports survival depended on routine leadership and the refusal to give in to despair. You do not have a crew. You do not have leadership in the traditional sense, but you do have the ability to create routine, and for now you must lead yourself. There is an unusual historical anecdote from that same era. Some expedition members would maintain strict daily rituals even when stranded, shaving regularly, keeping clothing tidy, and holding scheduled meals even if portions were small. At first glance, it seems unnecessary, almost absurd. Why shave when survival is at stake? But the purpose was not appearance, it was control. By maintaining ordinary habits, they preserved a sense of order in a situation that threatened to dissolve it. The mind-given structure resists panic. It holds on to identity. It remembers that life continues beyond the immediate hardship. You consider this quietly. You cannot shave. You cannot set a proper table. You cannot write a journal entry with a neat date and a steady hand. But you can keep your small routines. Breath counting, body checks, shelter maintenance. These are your rituals now. Outside, a faint scraping sound reaches you. It is close nearer than the earlier wind noise. You hold your breath and listen. A pause, then another soft scrape. It could be an animal moving lightly across the snow, testing the surface, searching for something beneath. Perhaps a fox, perhaps something smaller. The sound is cautious, deliberate, not hurried. You remain still, letting your shelter hide you as best it can. In cold regions, animals often conserve energy by moving only when necessary. This is a widely accepted observation among wildlife researchers. Every step costs something, so movement is purposeful. You're beginning to understand that same economy in yourself. The sound fades. You release your breath slowly, careful not to create sudden noise. Your heart beats a little faster for a moment, then settles again. Stories return to your mind. You think of early Arctic hunters who could read the snow the way you might read a page, knowing where animals passed, where they rested, where they might return. You think of explorers who underestimated the cold and paid for it. You think of travelers who survived by learning, quickly adapting, observing, refusing to waste energy on pride. There is a lesser-known detail from polar history that some expedition members kept small personal tokens, objects that had no practical use but carried emotional weight. A photograph, a letter, a carved piece of wood. These items were not tools, but they mattered. They reminded people of connection of purpose beyond the immediate struggle. You have no such object here, but you have memory. Memory can serve a similar role if handled carefully. Not the kind that pulls you into longing, into thoughts of warmth so vivid they become painful, but the kind that reminds you that this moment is part of a larger life, that you are more than the cold, more than the hunger, more than the narrow space of this shelter. Some scholars have examined survival narratives and noted how often individuals rely on mental anchors, whether memories, beliefs, or simple repeated thoughts to maintain stability. The exact effectiveness of these anchors varies and interpretations differ, but the pattern is consistent. The mind seeks something to hold on to when the environment offers little else. You choose a simple thought. Stay until light. It is not grand, it is not poetic, but it is clear. You do not need to solve tomorrow yet. You do not need to find food in the dark. You do not need to understand the ash or map the forest or imagine rescue. You need to remain here, maintain warmth, preserve strength, and reach the next change in light. Stay until light. You repeat it quietly, not aloud, just enough to shape the rhythm of your thinking. Your body responds in small ways. Your breathing steadies further. The tension in your shoulders eases slightly. The task feels contained, manageable even if difficult. The night continues. At some point you notice that the darkness has shifted again. It is still night, but not as deep as before. Perhaps clouds have thinned. Perhaps the moon has moved behind them. The snow outside reflects a little more light enough to outline the trees more clearly. This subtle change lifts something inside you. Light is not here yet, but the promise of it exists. In many historical accounts of survival in extreme conditions, the approach of dawn is described as a turning point. Not because it solves everything, but because it changes the nature of the challenge. Visibility improves, movement becomes safer, options expand. Historians have long discussed whether the psychological impact of dawn was as important as its practical benefits. It is difficult to measure, but the repeated emphasis suggests it mattered. Hope, even in small amounts, can alter behavior, decision-making, and endurance. You feel that now. Not hope in the sense of rescue or certainty, but hope as a shift, a change in direction. The night has been long, but it is not endless. You adjust your position, slightly careful to maintain the integrity of your shelter. Your muscles are stiff, but still responsive. Your fingers ache, but they move. Your toes remain present, though quiet. Your body has endured the night so far. That is something. You listen once more to the forest. The sounds are the same, small and scattered, but they feel different now. Less like threats, more like background. You have begun to understand them at least enough not to react to every whisper. Understanding reduces fear. Not completely, not permanently, but enough to continue. You close your eyes briefly, not to sleep deeply, but to rest within the rhythm you have built. Breath check, listen, repeat. The routine carries you forward minute by minute toward a light you cannot yet see clearly. And in that slow, careful movement through time, you begin to realize that survival is not a single act, but a series of small, deliberate continuations. Stay until light. You hold on to that. The first hint of dawn does not arrive as light so much as a thinning of darkness. The trees remain black, the snow still grey, the air still bitterly cold. But something has loosened in the world. The shelter mouth no longer opens into a wall of shadow. Shapes return slowly. Branches separate from trunks. The snow wall shows its uneven surface patched with ash and needle fragments, homely and flawed and deeply beautiful because it did not collapse on you in the night. A low standard for beauty perhaps, but winter has adjusted your expectations. You flex your hands, stiff aching but yours. Your toes answer too slowly. You take this as good news and do not ask for poetry from them. Toes are practical citizens. If they remain attached to the project, one should be grateful. You ease yourself upright as much as the little shelter allows. The boughs beneath you have flattened and your hip aches where a branch spent the night being very committed to discomfort. Your coat smells of spruce snow ash and human fear that has tried to behave itself. You brush your sleeve lightly, sending a fine dusting of grey flakes to the ground. Clothing, you realise, has become your second shelter. Not in a casual way, people say such things when choosing a coat for a chilly walk. Here each layer is a wall, each fold a trap for warm air, each gap a leak. During the night you learned the importance of cuffs, collars, hems and covered skin. Now in the weak dawn you inspect yourself like a tired quartermaster. Neck covered, wrists mostly sealed, gloves dry enough, socks uncertain but not wet, coat still holding warmth, no obvious tears large enough to invite disaster. A widely known historical fact is that many Arctic and subarctic peoples developed clothing systems that used fur with extraordinary efficiency. Caribou skin, for example, was prized in parts of the far north because each hollow hair trapped insulating air. Garments could be layered with fur facing inward or outward depending on conditions. This was not fashion in the decorative sense, though some clothing was beautifully made. It was engineering made wearable. You unfortunately are not wrapped in expertly prepared caribou clothing. You're wrapped in whatever you arrived with, which is better than nothing, and worse than wisdom. Still you can improve how you use it. You tighten loose areas without cutting circulation. That part matters. Too tight and blood flow suffers. Too loose and heat escapes. You tuck fabric where the night has pulled it free. You shake loose snow from your outer layer before it melts from body warmth. You check for dampness near the cloth you use for melting snow and keep it away from your inner layers. The small management of clothing feels almost fussy. But fussy has kept many people alive. Great disasters sometimes begin with ignored details. There is a curious old belief from parts of northern Eurasia that clothing could carry not only warmth, but luck. Hunters might avoid repairing certain garments in particular ways before a journey, fearing that a bad stitch could invite misfortune. On the practical side, of course, a bad stitch really could invite cold air, snow or tearing. Superstition and sewing have occasionally been closer relatives than they admit. Researchers still wrestle with how to separate symbolic meanings from practical functions in traditional clothing. A fur trim around the hood may look ceremonial to an outsider, but it also slows wind and protects the face. A decorative seam may carry identity, skill and structural strength all at once. The past rarely organises itself into tidy museum labels. You pull your collar closer and think of all the people who understood that before you did. The dawn continues to strengthen. Pale light filters through the spruce and the forest becomes readable again. Your shelter looks smaller than it felt in the dark, almost embarrassing really. A low heap of branches and snow tucked among trunks with your tracks scuffed around it like evidence of a very confused animal. But it worked. You crawl out carefully, one movement at a time. Cold air wraps your face. Your knees resist. You stand slowly, avoiding dizziness. The snow beyond the shelters changed overnight. The ash lies more evenly now, a grey veil over the white surface. Your old tracks are softened. The small animal paths remain faint but visible. The leaning spruce with the broken top still marks the firmer corridor you noticed before. You do not move far yet. Instead, you continue the inventory of fabric and body. You rub warmth back into your hands by pressing them under your arms, not by flailing. You flex your feet inside your boots. You bend and straighten your knees gently. You lift your shoulders, roll them once, then stop before the motion becomes wasted effort. Your clothing has to work with your movement. Too much exertion and sweat becomes the enemy. Too little movement and cold creeps in. You're learning that survival is one long negotiation with moderation, which is annoying because moderation rarely gets dramatic music. You look at the trees around you and consider what they might offer for insulation. More boughs for bedding, more branches for barriers, bark that might help seal gaps, needles that can be piled where the ground draws heat. None of it luxurious, all of it useful. You gather a few more spruce boughs from fallen limbs near the shelter, adding them to the compressed mattress. The work warms you slightly. You keep the pace controlled, breathing through your nose when you can, pausing before sweat gathers. The scent of resin sharpens where branches snap. It is clean, bitter green beneath the cold. A thought rises from the night's lessons. If you must remain another night, the shelter needs improvement before exhaustion deepens. It needs better ground insulation, a narrower entrance, a more stable snowbank along the windward side. You should do that while daylight holds and your mind is clearer. But another need pulls at you: water. And beyond water, eventually movement. You stand beside the shelter and look down at your clothes again. They have become your mobile home, poor but loyal. You think of fur parkas, wool layers, hide boots stuffed with grass mittens designed with generations of trial behind them. You think of how easily modern people mistake clothing for a product rather than a relationship with weather. Out here, clothing is not an outfit. It is a treaty. Your treaty is imperfect, but still in force. You brush ash from your shoulders, not because it matters much, but because the act steadies you. You adjust your gloves. You tuck your chin into your collar. The forest before you is cold, quiet, and faintly blue with morning. The night did not take you. Now the day asks what you will do with what remains. You glance toward the firmer passage by the leaning spruce, then back at the shelter, then down at your hands. Fabric, skin breath boughs snow. That is your inventory. That is your history lesson made immediate. People did not survive frozen worlds by wishing them softer. They wrap themselves in knowledge one layer at a time. You take a slow step into the morning, carrying your warmth carefully with you. The morning does not warm you so much as reveal you. You stand among the spruce with your shelter behind you, a small dark hollow pressed into the snow, and the pale daylight shows what night kindly hid. Your clothes are dusted with ash. Your gloves are stiff. Your tracks loop around the trees in uneven lines. The shelter, though precious, looks like something built by a tired animal with access to anxiety and branches. Still it held. That matters. You take another careful step toward the firmer corridor near the leaning spruce, then pause. The forest ahead seems quiet, layered in grey and blue. Snow lies between trunks in shallow bands. Farther out, the open basin waits brighter and colder. You do not yet commit to leaving. Instead, you let your eyes move slowly, taking in direction wind shadows, the shape of the land. The mind wanders when it's frightened, but it also wanders when it is alone. Yours begins to move northward, not in geography exactly, but in memory and imagination. It drifts toward every story you've ever heard about people lost in white places, toward names half remembered from documentaries, toward maps with empty spaces and little drawings of ships, toward the long human habit of looking at cold land and deciding for reasons unclear to go farther into it. This is not helpful, perhaps, but it is human. Loneliness changes the scale of things. A tree becomes company. A footprint becomes conversation. Your own breath becomes proof that someone is still here. In ordinary life, solitude can feel peaceful, even luxurious. A closed door, a quiet room, a cup of tea, no one asking where the good scissors went. Here, solitude is different. It removes the safety net of another mind. There is no one to notice if you grow confused. No one to say you're moving too fast. No one to remind you that you already checked that pocket 3 times and tragically no sandwich has appeared. A well-established fact from the history of polar exploration is that isolation was considered a major hazard, not just emotionally but practically. Long expeditions built routines to preserve morale because mood and discipline affected survival. On ships, frozen into Arctic ice, or camps surrounded by Antarctic storms, crews organised lectures, games, readings, repairs and holiday celebrations to keep despair from spreading. They understood, sometimes imperfectly, that the mind could become another climate. You feel that climate shifting. The silence presses inward, not violently, more like deep water. You begin to notice how much you want a voice, even an annoying one. Someone complaining about the cold, someone making poor jokes, someone saying, well, this is not ideal, as if that statement were a useful contribution. Since no one is here, you speak inwardly, slowly, simply. Check the sky, check the snow, check your hands, remember the shelter, do not rush. The words help. They are not magic, but they give your thoughts a path. Without them, your mind might drift too far into memory, and memory can be both comfort and trap. You think of warm kitchens again, but less sharply than during the night. You think of lamps, curtains, a chair, the ordinary clutter of human life, shoes by a door, a spoon left in a cup, a message unread. Such things seem impossibly delicate now, artifacts from a civilization built around not freezing. A peculiar piece of Arctic expedition history says that crews sometimes created handwritten newspapers during wintering periods. They included jokes, poems, notices, mock advertisements, and reports of daily life. Imagine being trapped in ice and still thinking, yes, what we need is publishing. It sounds absurd, but it gave people roles, laughter, and a reason to think beyond the weather. A fake newspaper in a frozen ship could be as practical as a blanket in its own strange way. Specialists continue to examine whether morale-building activities on such expeditions were genuinely effective survival tools or simply later remembered as noble distractions. From where you stand, the distinction feels less important than it might in an archive. Anything that keeps a person thinking clearly has value. Anything that prevents the mind from folding inward too tightly may become part of survival. You have no newspaper, so you make a mental one. Weather cold ash covered disrespectful. Food supply imaginary. Shelter ugly but courageous. Outlook uncertain with scattered chances of stubbornness. A faint laugh escapes you, barely a sound. It fogs in front of your face and vanishes. The laugh surprises you. It does not warm your hands, but it warms something else, a tiny interior corner that had begun to stiffen. Then the loneliness returns, but softer. You look at the tracks near your shelter. Your own are easiest to read now, clumsy and deep. The animal trails remain lighter, more graceful. You think again about belonging. The hare belongs. The fox belongs. The trees belong by not needing to move at all, which seems almost smug. You are the unsettled creature, the visitor who must learn quickly or become part of the snow's record. The thought could frighten you, but instead it steadies you. You do not need to feel at home here. You only need to behave correctly long enough to leave. Loneliness bends time. Already the night feels distant and close at once. Did it last hours? A lifetime, 10 minutes wearing a very convincing costume you cannot tell. Your memory of it has become a sequence of sensations, breath, toes, branches, thirst, wind, the low sound beyond the trees. Without another person, memory has no witness. You must trust your own account. That is harder than expected. People in remote cold regions often relied on communal memory as much as individual experience. Stories told where storms gathered, where ice thinned, where animals moved, where people once made mistakes. Knowledge lived between people. Alone, you can only carry what is already inside you plus what the land teaches now. The land is teaching in a quiet voice. Wind moves through the treetops from the same direction as before. The corridor by the leaning spruce remains protected. Snow under the trees is shallower. The open basin is brighter, but likely harsher. Your shelter is a known point, and known points are rare gifts. You decide not to leave it yet. Not fully. Instead, you will range only a short distance in daylight, gather information, improve your shelter, seek signs of water or safer passage, then return before fatigue and fading light make wisdom harder. The decision calms you because it gives the day a shape. Loneliness hates shape, it prefers fog. You turn back to the shelter and add a few more boughs to the entrance, testing how easily it can be opened and closed. The work is small, almost domestic. You're tidying your disaster. There is dignity in that, or at least usefulness. Your hands move better now with the light and mild activity. Your shoulders loosen. Hunger remains, thirst remains, cold remains, but your mind is clearer than it was in the deepest night. You begin to understand that fear is not always the loudest danger. Sometimes the danger is the quiet unthreading of purpose. So you thread it again, one task, then another, then another. The frozen wilderness stretches around you vast and indifferent, but your world narrows to useful acts. Adjust clothing, study tracks, preserve warmth, keep the shelter, move only with reason, return before pride leads you outward. You glance once more into the trees toward the northward pull of imagination, toward all those old stories of ice endurance, foolishness, and luck. Then you bring yourself back to the present, to the scent of spruce and ash, to the stiff gloves on your hands, to the snow under your boots. Alone does not mean absent. You are still here, still choosing, still making a small human pattern in the cold. You stand between two instincts and both of them sound reasonable. Stay, move. The shelter behind you is real. You built it. You tested it. It carried you through the night, which already makes it more trustworthy than most ideas your mind has produced recently. It blocks wind. It holds a little warmth. It is known. But staying has limits. There is no food here. Water requires slow effort. The space is small, and while it protects it, also confines. If conditions worsen, if snow deepens, if your strength fades, remaining in one place without improvement could quietly become its own danger. Moving, on the other hand, offers possibility. Perhaps better terrain, perhaps access to water beneath ice, perhaps signs of human presence, though that feels unlikely. Perhaps simply a more efficient place to exist. Movement is hope in motion, and yet movement costs energy, heat, clarity. You shift your weight slightly, feeling the pull in your legs, the dull ache in your shoulders, the careful balance your body is maintaining. You're not strong right now. Not weak enough to collapse, but not strong enough to waste effort on guesses. This is the moment where decision matters more than speed. There is a widely recognized principle in survival situations often summarized simply: stop, think, observe, plan. It sounds almost too calm, too organized for a situation that feels anything but. Yet in many historical accounts, those who paused to assess before acting often made better choices than those who rushed forward out of fear or urgency. You're already doing part of it. You have stopped. You have thought, though. Your thoughts have occasionally tried to wander towards soup and bad ideas. You have observed. Now comes the plan. A small, deliberate plan. Not a grand journey. Not a heroic march into the unknown. Just a controlled extension of your awareness. You decide to explore in one direction only. The firmer corridor near the leaning spruce. It offered easier movement. It may lead somewhere useful. More importantly, it is a known feature, not an imagined one. You turn back to your shelter and study it again, committing its details to memory. The angle of the branches, the shape of the snow wall, the way the entrance faces slightly away from the prevailing wind. You look for markers around it, a twisted trunk, a low branch shaped like a bent arm, a cluster of exposed roots. These are your anchors. In some northern travel traditions, people use subtle markers to remember roots bending branches, or placing small signs that would be obvious to them, but nearly invisible to others. This practice, sometimes called trail marking, was not about leaving a bold path, but about creating a quiet conversation with the landscape. A broken twig here, a stone placed there, enough to guide a return without announcing it to the entire forest. You consider doing the same. You break a small branch from a nearby fallen limb and place it upright in the snow near your shelter, angled slightly toward the entrance. It is not dramatic. It will not last forever. But it is something, a point of return. There is an odd historical tidbit that some early explorers tied bits of cloth or ribbon to branches as markers, only to find them later removed or altered by weather animals or simply time. The lesson was simple. Markers are helpful, but memory must carry more weight than any object left behind. You nod slightly to yourself as if agreeing with someone who is not there. Memory first, marker second. You take a slow breath and begin moving toward the corridor. Your steps are careful, measured. The snow here is indeed firmer packed by repeated movement or wind. It holds your weight better, reducing the effort required. Each step feels slightly easier, though still deliberate. You keep your pace controlled. Too fast and you risk sweat. Too slow and the cold begins to settle again. Balance. The trees shift around you as you move, their spacing changing subtly. The corridor curves gently, not a straight path, but a suggestion of one. You follow it, keeping track of your direction relative to the shelter. You glance back occasionally, ensuring you can still see your marker, your small upright branch. It remains visible. Good. You continue. The forest opens slightly ahead, not into a full clearing, but into a wider space where the snow dips and the trees thin. The light here is stronger, reflecting off the surface in a pale glow. You pause at the edge, scanning carefully. No immediate movement. No large tracks. The snow surface here is different. Harder in places, crusted with shallow depressions that suggest older disturbances. You step forward and test it. Your boot breaks through slightly, then holds. Manageable. You move a few steps farther, then stop. There, near the base of a cluster of rocks, you notice something. A darker patch. Not large, not obvious, but distinct against the surrounding snow. You approach slowly, your senses sharpening. The patch resolves into a shallow depression where the snow appears thinner, slightly melted or compacted. You crouch, carefully examining it. The surface is icy with a faint sheen. You touch it with your glove. Hard, cold, but different from the surrounding snow. Possibly water beneath. In cold environments, water can sometimes be found under thinner ice, or in areas where ground heat or movement prevents full freezing. It is not guaranteed. It is not safe without caution. But it is a possibility. Your mind sharpens. Water means life, but also risk. Breaking through ice could soak your clothing, and wet clothing in freezing conditions is a serious problem. You must not rush this. You stand again, stepping back slightly. You mark the location in your mind: rock cluster, shallow dip, dark patch. You do not investigate further yet. Not without a plan. Historians and survival experts often emphasize that water sources in cold regions require careful approach. Ice thickness, temperature, and underlying flow all matter. Misjudgment can lead to sudden immersion, which in freezing conditions can become life-threatening very quickly. You're not equipped to handle that. Not now, so you store the information, potential water, possible future action. Not immediate. You turn back toward your shelter. The decision feels correct. You have extended your awareness. You have identified a potential resource. You have not spent excessive energy. You have not taken unnecessary risk. This is how survival builds, not in leaps, in increments. As you walk back along the corridor, your marker comes into view again, the small branch standing at an angle in the snow. It looks fragile, almost insignificant, but it leads you home. You step back into the cluster of trees, the shelter appearing as a low shape beneath the branches. The familiarity of it brings a quiet sense of relief. Not safety, but orientation. You crouch near the entrance, brushing away a small drift of snow that has gathered. You adjust a branch, press the snow wall where it has softened slightly, maintaining its shape. Small repairs, constant attention. You glance once more toward the corridor, toward the wider forest beyond. Movement will come again. Decisions will continue. But for now you have chosen correctly, and in this place that is enough. You return to your shelter with a new kind of attention. Little Refuge is no longer just a place to hide from wind. It has become a workshop, though, calling it that feels generous. There is no bench, no lamp, no neat rows of tools hanging on a wall. There is snow spruce ash cloth cord, a dull button, your tired hands, and a brain that is beginning to understand the value of small things. Small tools, large consequences. That is the lesson waiting in the morning cold. You crouch near the entrance and empty your pockets again slowly as if the contents might have improved through patience. They have not. Still you lay them out on a flattened patch of snow beside you. A short bit of cord, a loose button, dull metal, or perhaps coated plastic hard to tell in this light. A folded scrap of cloth, a few tiny fragments of lint and grit. Not impressive, not the heroic inventory of a prepared expedition. More like the contents of a coat that once had better plans. Yet nothing here is meaningless. One dependable fact from the history of exploration is that repair materials often mattered as much as weapons or food. Sailors, trappers, soldiers and polar travellers carried needles, cordage, spare straps, patches and binding materials because equipment fails before courage does. On long journeys, a torn boot, broken sledge runner or split mitten could become a survival problem. The people who lasted were often not the boldest, but the ones who could mend. You look at the cord. It is short but strong enough for something. A tie, a loop, a marker, perhaps a way to secure branches more tightly on the shelter wall. You test it between your gloved fingers. It resists. Good. The button may be useful too, not as a button necessarily, since fashion is no longer your most urgent department, but as a weight, a scraper, a marker, a tiny reflective point if the sun appears. You turn it toward the pale light. It gives almost nothing back. Still, almost nothing is a familiar standard now. The cloth is the most versatile. Meltwater filter hand wrap, signal marker if tied to a branch, extra insulation, if tucked at the neck, bandage, if the day becomes rude. The problem is that it cannot be all of these at once. Every object has possible futures, and choosing one future closes others. You begin with the shelter. The windward wall has held, but some branches have shifted. Snow has settled into cracks. The entrance is still too open for a second night if conditions worsen. You use the cord to lash two flexible branches together, pulling them across the low opening so they can support more boughs. Your fingers are clumsy in the cold, and tying knots through gloves is an exercise in humility. You consider removing a glove for better dexterity, then reject the idea. Exposed skin loses heat too quickly, and a perfect knot is not worth a numb hand, so you make an ugly knot. It holds. Excellent. Civilization advances. You weave smaller branches through the tied frame, creating a movable screen that can be pulled partly across the entrance, while still allowing air to circulate. You do not want to seal yourself completely inside. Breath carries moisture. Moisture condenses. Condensation freezes. A shelter that traps all air can become damp and dangerous. The aim is reduced wind, not a sealed coffin made by an overachieving beaver. You test the screen. It shifts but does not collapse. You add snow at the base, packing lightly. The shelter becomes a little darker, a little calmer. A quirky detail from the age of Arctic travel is that expedition members sometimes improvise snow goggles from wood bone, or other scraps cutting narrow slits to reduce glare. The idea seems almost stylish, until you remember snow blindness can be brutal. Inuit and Yupik makers used such designs long before many outsiders understood their importance. Two tiny slits could protect vision in a world too bright to look at directly. You glance at your button again and imagine absurdly trying to become an eyewear designer out here. Not today. The sky's dim, the forest shaded, and your current collection of materials would embarrass even a very forgiving craft circle. But the lesson remains. A small object shaped correctly can change what the body can endure. Cultural historians continue to dispute how often European explorers genuinely adopted indigenous tool designs with respect rather than treating them as curiosities after local expertise had already saved them. The question matters because objects carry knowledge. A snow goggle is not just a thing. A fur boot is not just a thing. A knot a sled, a needle case, a drinking vessel, a shelter frame, each contains generations of trial, error and memory. Your own little inventions contain about 12 hours of trial and a great deal of error, but they are improving. You take the cloth and decide to divide it. Not completely. A torn edge may unravel. But you can use one corner. Carefully you pull at a seam until a narrow strip loosens. It takes effort and your fingers ache, but finally a thin band comes free. You tie the strip high on the leaning spruce near your shelter where it can serve as a marker. Pale cloth against dark bark. It is not bright, but it is visible from the corridor. You step back and check. There, a small sign of return. The remaining cloth you keep for water. That choice feels right. Thirst will return. The potential ice patch near the rocks may require filtering slush or handling small amounts of melt. The cloth may help keep grit and ash out, though it will not purify everything. You remind yourself not to trust it too much. A cloth is a cloth, not a miracle wearing fibres. Next you search the ground near the shelter for stones. Most are buried, but near exposed roots. You find a few small ones hard and cold, their surfaces slick with frost. One has a sharper edge. You use it to scrape lightly at a dead branch, shaving loose dry inner fibres. The process is slow without a proper knife, but some pale curls appear. If you ever find a spark source, dry scrapings might matter. For now, you store them inside the remaining cloth, keeping them protected from snow. This is how possibility is built. Not because you can use it immediately, because later may ask for it. You also collect straight twigs and place them together near the shelter wall, partly under branches where falling snow will not bury them quickly. They could serve as probes for testing snow depth or ice crust. A longer branch becomes a walking staff, rough but helpful. When you press it into the snow, it reveals hollows before your boot does. That alone may prevent a fall. You grip it and feel suddenly less alone. Not dramatically, it is still a stick. Let us remain reasonable. But a stick extends the body. It tests the world before you enter it. It gives the hand a task. Humans have been improving their chances with sticks for a very long time, and frankly, the basic design holds up. You walk a short loop around the shelter using the branch to probe drifts. One hollow collapses under the staff with a soft puff. You mark that place in memory. A void. Another patch feels firm. Good. The staff taps, buried roots, finds shallow crust reveals where snow has drifted deeper along the tree bases. Information again. Always information. You return to the entrance and lean the staff within reach. The shelter now contains more than a body. It contains chosen things. A tied branch, screen-stored twigs, a cloth packet of scrapings, a marker, strip a staff. Small tools, small order. A little human logic placed against the cold. The wilderness remains vast. Your food remains non-existent. The possible water near the rocks remains risky. Rescue remains uncertain. But your situation has changed because you have changed it slightly and deliberately. You sit back on your bough mattress, breathing slowly, hands tucked close. The shelter smells of fresh scraped wood, now faintly sweet beneath the resin and ash. The light outside is pale but stronger than before. You listen to the forest and feel the quiet satisfaction of ugly work that holds. No grand triumph, no dramatic music, just a knot that does not slip, a branch that tests snow, a strip of cloth tied where you can see it, and the fragile comfort of knowing that even with almost nothing you are still making choices. Beyond the tree line, the animals continue their ancient business without asking whether you approve. You sit for a while in the improved shelter, holding the rough staff across your knees, and feel the morning stretch into something broader. The pale light strengthens, though warmth does not follow in any meaningful way. The forest remains cold enough to keep your breath visible, cold enough to make your fingers ache if you forget them, cold enough to remind you that daylight is not kindness. It is only visibility. Still, visibility changes everything. You can see the corridor now with more confidence. The leaning spruce, the strip of cloth tied above the shelter, the faint track line where your own boots have passed. The world has regained edges. That alone feels like a gift. And with edges come signs of other lives. Near the base of a fallen trunk, you notice a line of tiny prints that were hidden from your earlier angle. They look like little stitches in the snow running from one pocket of cover to another. Some small creature has crossed here, perhaps a vole or ermine, its body light enough to leave only faint marks. The prints vanish beneath a low tangle of branches where the snow has formed a shallow tunnel. You do not disturb it. The forest may look still, but beneath the surface it is busy. Snow can create an insulating layer under which small mammals move through tunnels, protected from wind and extreme surface cold. Naturalists call this hidden zone the subnivean space. It is not warm exactly, but it can be far less severe than the open air above. To a tiny animal, the snow is not only a roof of danger, it is a ceiling, a passage, even a shelter. You find that strangely comforting. The same material that threatens you protects others. Snow is not evil. It is simply snow, which may be worse in some ways because at least evil would imply interest. You rise slowly and step outside, taking the staff with you. Your body is stiff, but the controlled movement brings a little heat back into your limbs. You move toward the corridor, but not far, scanning the snow for signs. You are not hunting. You are learning. There is a difference, and today that difference matters. Ahead, where the trees thin toward the basin, the light grows brighter and the wind becomes more noticeable. You stop before leaving sheltering cover. The open ground beyond appears smooth, pale, and faintly grey with ash. Nothing moves. Yet the absence of movement does not mean absence of animals. In frozen landscapes, many creatures survive by being unseen. A familiar historical fact comes to mind: reindeer and caribou have supported northern peoples across Eurasia and North America for thousands of years, providing meat hides, sinew tools, transport, and cultural meaning. Their ability to dig through snow for lichens made them central to life in regions where agriculture was limited or impossible. Entire ways of moving, dressing, eating, and storytelling grew around them. You look across the open basin and see no reindeer, no caribou, no gentle procession of useful animals arriving like a documentary hosted by Mercy. Only snow. Still, the idea matters. Animals are not background decoration in human history. They have shaped routes, diets, clothing, trade, myth, and survival. In places like this, the boundary between human life and animal life was never as firm as modern people sometimes imagine. You step back into the trees where the wind softens again. A dark dropping on the snow catches your eye. Small oval, frozen, not fresh enough to be useful as a sign of immediate presence, but evidence. Hair, perhaps. You examine it without touching. Nearby twigs have been nibbled. The bark is stripped in small, clean marks. Food exists for someone here, though not necessarily for you. There is a curious fringe belief from some old hunting traditions that animals might deliberately offer themselves to respectful hunters, especially if proper rituals were kept. To a modern ear that may sound mystical, but it reflects a worldview in which survival depended on relationship, gratitude, and restraint. Whether one reads it literally or symbolically, it discouraged waste. It reminded people that taking life in hard country was not casual. You with no trap, no weapon, and no wish to chase anything into exhaustion are not taking life today. That is just as well. Respect is easier when you're not trying and failing to catch breakfast with a stick. Researchers have offered differing interpretations of animal offering traditions, with some viewing them as spiritual beliefs and others as social systems that regulated hunting pressure. The archive cannot always separate faith from ecology, because people themselves often did not separate them. Life, belief, hunger and restraint were braided together. You continue along the edge of the corridor, using the staff to test the snow. Then you hear it, a soft, quick movement to your left. Not loud, not close enough to panic. A flicker of white against white, almost invisible until it moves again. A hare darts from one patch of cover to another and vanishes beneath low branches. For a moment your body reacts before thought arrives. Hunger rises suddenly sharp and bright. Food, warmth, energy. Then reality follows. You have no way to catch it. The hare is built for this. You're built for ordering groceries and occasionally overestimating your winter competence. The contest would be embarrassing and not for the hare, so you watch the empty place where it disappeared and let hunger settle back down. The sight still gives you information. Hares use this cover. Predators may also hunt here. The animal moved toward the denser trees away from the basin, suggesting cover is better there. That may matter if weather worsens. It may also mean you should avoid disturbing that area too much. You're not the only creature conserving energy. Farther off above the trees a bird crosses the pale sky. Dark wings, slow beat, perhaps a raven. It glides, adjusts, then disappears beyond the spruce tops. Ravens have long lived in human imagination as clever, watchful birds of cold places. Norse traditions placed ravens beside Odin, while many indigenous stories across the north cast them as creators, tricksters, messengers, or thieves. Real ravens are intelligent opportunists very good at noticing what others miss. You wonder what it notices about you. Probably not flattering. A tired human near a snow lump holding a stick pretending to be strategic. Still seeing a bird lifts your spirit slightly. The world is alive above as well as beneath. Life moves in layers around you under snow, across snow, through branches over treetops. You're surrounded not by emptiness but by adaptation. That word becomes important. Adaptation. The hare has wide feet and winter camouflage. Small mammals tunnel under snow. Ravens search from above. Trees bend rather than break. Even the fox tracks from last night spoke of efficiency purpose routes, learned through repetition. What do you have? Awareness, hands, a shelter, a staff, some cloth, memory, the capacity to learn faster than comfort ever required. It is not much. It is what you have. You return toward the shelter, careful not to follow the hare's path. Your energy is already lower than at dawn. The brief walk has warmed you but also reminded you of your limits. Your stomach remains empty, and the cold will make sure every effort is noticed. At the shelter you stop and look once more across the trees toward the basin. Animals beyond the tree line may threaten, guide, or ignore you, but mostly they reveal the truth of the place. Survival here is not a battle scene. It is a web of tiny efficiencies. No wasted motion, no unnecessary exposure, no pride in suffering. Just bodies shaped by need moving through winter with old intelligence. You crouch by your snow wall and rest the staff beside you. The hare remains somewhere under cover. The raven is gone. The small tracks under the trunk continue unseen. None of these creatures came to save you. None came to harm you. They simply showed you how life keeps going when the world is cold. You tuck your hands under your arms and listen. For the first time, the forest no longer feels empty. It feels occupied, and you carefully, humbly must learn how to be one more living thing inside it. You begin to think about rescue, and immediately you distrust the thought. Not because rescue is impossible, but because it is unpredictable. It arrives when it cannot, when you decide it should. The wilderness does not operate on schedules that include your convenience, and no distant figure is currently waving cheerfully through the trees with a blanket and a cup of something warm. Still, the idea matters, not as expectation, as preparation. You sit just outside your shelter, letting your body settle after the brief movement through the trees. The staff rests beside you, your small arrangement of tools tucked close, your breath steady in the cold air. The light has grown stronger, though the sun itself remains hidden behind a pale sky. Shadows stretch longer now, faint and blue. If someone were to look for you, what would they see? That question becomes your next task. In many historical survival accounts, signalling played a crucial role in rescue. Lost travelers, stranded explorers, and even downed pilots often relied on visual signals to attract attention. Bright colours against snow, unusual shapes, smoke from fires, reflective surfaces, and deliberate patterns all increase the chance of being noticed. You have none of the obvious tools. No mirror, no bright fabric, no fire to produce smoke. But you do have contrast. You look around the shelter area with new eyes. The snow is pale, the ash gives it a grey tint, the trees are dark. Your shelter itself is a low, irregular shape. From above or at a distance, it might blend into the landscape, unless something breaks the pattern. You stand and begin making that break. You gather a few branches and arrange them in a rough line extending outward from your shelter, not randomly, but with intention. A straight line is unnatural here. The forest grows in irregular patterns. A straight line suggests design. Design suggests presence. You place the branches, carefully spacing them so they create a visible mark against the snow. Not perfect, not symmetrical, but deliberate enough to catch the eye. There is an unusual historical detail from early aviation rescue efforts. Pilots were taught to create large ground symbols using available materials such as logs, stones, or trampled snow to signal distress. Even simple shapes could be seen from above if they contrasted with the surrounding terrain. The idea was not elegance, but visibility. You extend your line into a rough arrow shape, pointing toward your shelter. It is crude. It leans slightly. One branch refuses to sit properly and keeps rolling back into its original position, as if it has strong opinions about geometry. You adjust it again. There, an arrow, or at least something that aspires to be an arrow. You step back and examine it from a few angles. Against the grey-white snow, the dark branches stand out. From a distance, it might look like nothing, or it might look like something unusual enough to draw attention. That is the best you can do for now. You return to the shelter and consider your clothing again. The strip of cloth tied to the leaning spruce is a small marker, useful for you, but not large enough to signal far away. You take another small piece from the remaining cloth, hesitating for a moment. Every cut reduces its other uses, but visibility may matter more. You tie the second strip higher on a branch that extends outward, where it can catch light and movement. Even a slight flutter in the wind might make it noticeable. Movement attracts attention. Stillness hides. There is ongoing discussion among historians about how effective improvised signals were in different survival situations. Some accounts suggest they made the difference between being found and being missed. Others indicate that harsh conditions, limited visibility, and sheer chance often played larger roles. The truth likely lies somewhere between. Signals improve odds, but they do not guarantee outcomes. You accept that. You're not creating certainty. You are creating possibility. You sit again, conserving energy. The work has cost you a little warmth, a little strength. Your stomach reminds you of its emptiness. Your throat feels dry again, though less so than before. The potential water source near the rocks remains in your mind, waiting for a careful approach. Rescue, if it comes, will not come immediately. You must plan as if it will not. That is the difficult balance. Hope without dependence. You think of people who waited for rescue in harsh conditions, some found, some not. Survivors often described a mental shift, a point where they stopped expecting immediate help and began focusing entirely on sustaining themselves. It was not a loss of hope, but a change in its shape. Hope became quieter, more practical, less about being saved, more about continuing. You feel that shift now. You look at your shelter, your small arrow of branches, the cloth strips, the staff, the scattered signs of your presence. It is not much, but it is something. It is evidence that you are here, that you are thinking, that you are still part of the world. You take a slow breath and let it out. The forest remains indifferent. The sky remains pale. The cold remains steady. But you have done what you can to be seen. Now you must do what you can to endure. You lean back against the snow wall, careful not to collapse it, and close your eyes for a moment, not sleeping, just resting. Your mind moves through the tasks ahead. Water, shelter improvement, limited movement, energy conservation, one step at a time. The wilderness does not require you to solve everything at once. It only requires that you do not fail at the next thing. You open your eyes again and look at the arrow of branches pointing toward you. It is crooked, imperfect, almost laughable in its simplicity, but it exists, and sometimes existence is the signal. Your strength feels different now, not gone, not failing, just thinner like a thread that must be handled with care. Each movement costs a little more than it did this morning. Each decision arrives with a quiet reminder that energy is not returning, only being spent. You sit beside your shelter watching the pale daylight stretch across the snow, and you begin to understand something that is both obvious and difficult. You cannot afford waste anymore. Not in movement, not in thought, not in heat. Your body has reserves, but they are being used. Hunger has settled into a steady emptiness. Thirst waits patiently for its next turn. The cold continues its slow negotiation with your muscles, your fingers, your attention. This is where many survival stories become quiet. Not dramatic, not filled with sudden danger, just a gradual narrowing of options. A widely accepted fact in cold weather survival is that conserving energy becomes critical after the first day without food. The body shifts from immediate fuel to stored reserves, and while it can sustain this for some time, performance decreases. Movement becomes slower, recovery takes longer, judgment can blur if exhaustion deepens. You feel that shift beginning, so you respond by becoming smaller. Not physically, though you do curl inward when resting, smaller in action, smaller in decision. You reduce everything to what matters most. Warmth, water, shelter, clarity. You check your shelter again, pressing the snow wall where it has softened slightly under the daylight. The surface has begun to change, the ash darkening patches that may absorb more light, and subtly alter the structure. You reinforce weak spots with additional snow packing, gently careful not to overcompress. Your fingers protest. You ignore them, but not completely. You pause often, tucking your hands back under your arms, letting warmth return in slow waves. There is a peculiar detail from some cold weather accounts where individuals described a strange sense of comfort when becoming very tired, as if the body were offering a softer path. This is dangerous. That softness can lead to stillness, and stillness can lead to a loss of heat. Your body may suggest rest. You must decide how much rest is safe. Researchers have long examined the point at which fatigue in extreme environments shifts from recovery to risk. The exact boundary is difficult to define, varying by individual condition and environment, but the principle remains clear: too much rest without adequate insulation and heat can accelerate decline, so you manage rest like everything else, in small amounts. With awareness, you lean back against the shelter, not fully reclining, keeping your body engaged enough to maintain circulation. Your staff rests within reach. Your cloth, your small collection of materials remain organized. Order matters. It reduces the effort required to think. You glance toward the arrow of branches you placed earlier. It still stands slightly uneven, but visible. The cloth strip tied above it moves faintly in the breeze. It is a signal, a small one, but real. There's an old, somewhat unusual belief among some travelers that leaving signs behind was not just for rescue but for future travelers as a kind of message across time. A marker might say someone was here. Someone thought about survival. Someone tried. Whether anyone would ever see such a sign is uncertain, but the act of leaving it matters. It places you in a line of human behavior that stretches back through countless journeys. Marking, signaling, communicating, even in isolation. You look at your own signs and feel a quiet connection to that pattern. Not comfort, but continuity. The forest remains still around you, though not silent. A faint movement in the distance catches your attention. You turn your head, slowly conserving energy even in observation. A shape moves between the trees, low, controlled. Not large enough to threaten you directly, but not small either. A fox, perhaps. It moves with quiet efficiency, its body a smooth line against the snow. It pauses briefly, head turning as if listening. Then it continues, crossing the edge of your awareness and slipping deeper into the forest. You remain still, watching. The fox does not acknowledge you. It does not need to. It has its own path, its own needs, its own understanding of this place. You are not part of its world. Not yet. There is a quiet lesson in that. Survival here is not about dominating the environment. It is about fitting into it, even temporarily. The fox wastes nothing. Its movements are precise, its energy conserved. You take that lesson and hold it. Move only when necessary. Observe more than you act. Conserve everything. The fox disappears. The forest returns to its steady state. You shift slightly, feeling the stiffness in your joints, the weight of your body against the cold. Your breathing remains steady. Your mind remains clear enough. That is what matters now, clarity. Without it, every other decision becomes unreliable. You think again about the water source near the rocks, the dark patch, the possibility beneath it. That will be your next task. Carefully, deliberately, but not yet. You allow yourself a few more moments of stillness, not drifting, not surrendering, just conserving. Your body needs it. Your mind uses the time to prepare. The wilderness does not rush. Neither can you. You look once more at your shelter, your tools, your markers, your small controlled space within a vast cold world. You are still here, still thinking, still choosing, and that is the line you must hold. Dawn has become day, though the cold remains perfectly unimpressed. You stand near the shelter with the staff in your hand, looking toward the rocks where the dark patch waits beneath its thin skin of ice. The branch arrow lies behind you. The cloth strips tremble faintly on the spruce. Your shelter sits low and crooked in the snow, less a home than a stubborn suggestion that you intend to remain alive. You take one slow breath. This is the fragile edge. Not rescue, not defeat, not triumph. Just the narrow place where survival becomes a series of gentle refusals. You refuse panic. You refuse waste. You refuse the soft invitation to lie down and let the cold finish its quiet argument. You move toward the rocks, carefully testing each step with the staff. The snow crust breaks in places, then holds. Your legs feel weak but obedient. Near the dark patch, you kneel slowly and probe the edge. Ice. Thin in one place, thicker in another. Beneath it perhaps slush, perhaps shallow water, perhaps only shadow. You do not break it wildly. Wet clothing would be disastrous. Instead, you scrape at the surface with the sharp stone you saved, loosening a little ice and clean snow. You gather a small amount into the cloth, warm it as before, and wait. A mainstream historical truth sits plainly in this moment. In cold country, survival has often depended on conserving heat, more than finding sudden rescue. From Arctic hunting camps to polar expeditions, people lived by careful routines, dry clothing, protected shelter, and measured movement. The dramatic moment matters less than the quiet discipline that comes before it. The cloth dampens slowly. You sip. It is cold, gritty, and beautiful. A strange tidbit comes to mind as you crouch there. Some old northern charms describe dawn as a doorway, a time when travellers should speak kindly to the road ahead. Maybe that was superstition. Maybe it was simply a way to begin another hard day without bitterness. Either way, you understand it now. A person alone in the cold needs every gentle sentence available. Historical psychologists have offered different views on whether survival stories are shaped more by actual decision-making or by the meaning survivors create afterward. Here the distinction feels thin. Meaning is not a luxury if it keeps you from surrendering. A sentence can become a handle. A memory can become a wall. A promise to last until light can carry a body through darkness. You return to the shelter slowly without spilling the small damp cloth. The world around you remains immense. Snow, spruce, ash, pale sky. No voices, no footsteps, no rescue yet. Yet something has changed. You're no longer only lost. You're located within your own decisions. The shelter is one decision, the arrow another, the staff another, the sips of water, the saved cloth, the refusal to chase the hare, the choice to move only in short loops. These tiny acts have made a path through the impossible. You sit behind the snow wall and rest your back against branches that smell of resin and cold. Your body is tired, hollow, and trembling lightly. But your thoughts remain clear enough to hold one truth. You have survived this long. That does not guarantee the next hour. It only gives you the next hour to use. And then far beyond the trees, something changes in the sound of the world. A faint rhythm. Not wind, not snow settling. You lift your head. There it is again. Distant, uncertain, carried strangely over the frozen basin. A dull, repeated beat, perhaps wood striking wood, perhaps machinery, perhaps imagination dressed in hope. You do not leap up. You do not shout yourself empty. You listen first because hope can be expensive too. The sound fades, then returns. You reach for the staff and pull yourself upright. Slowly, carefully. You move to the branch arrow and adjust the cloth strip higher, tying it where it can move in the breeze. Your fingers fumble, but the knot holds. You drag another dark branch into the open, lengthening the signal. If someone is out there, they may not see, but they might. You stand beside the crooked arrow, conserving breath. When the sound comes again, you call once, not a scream, a controlled call shaped from your chest and saved quickly afterward. The forest absorbs it. You wait. No answer. The quiet returns enormous and soft, and here at the edge between rescue and no rescue, you understand the final lesson of the frozen wilderness. Survival is not control. It is participation. You do what can be done with what remains in the time available. You are not promised rescue because you tried. You are not owed dawn because you endured night. But trying and enduring still matter. They are the human marks left on indifferent snow. You lower yourself back toward the shelter not in defeat, but in wisdom. You will keep the signal visible. You will sip carefully. You will rest without drifting too far. You will use the shelter again if another night comes. You will remain part of the world as long as your body and mind can agree to continue. The sound does not return for a while. Maybe it was real, maybe not, but the sky grows a little brighter and a thin wash of light touches the ash-grey snow. The trees seem less black now. The branch arrow casts a faint shadow. Your shelter, poor dear thing, looks almost dignified. You sit inside it, hands tucked close, listening. Fear is still here, but it has softened. It no longer owns the whole room. Hunger is here. Thirst is here. Cold is very much here, punctual as ever. But alongside them is something quieter. Acceptance, not surrender. Acceptance is simply seeing clearly. You may be found, you may not. You may stand again in an hour and call. You may improve the wall. You may sleep lightly, wait, check your toes, sip again, and continue. Life has narrowed to small verbs, and small verbs are enough. You let your eyes rest on the pale entrance where daylight filters through spruce needles and drifting ash. The wilderness has not become kind. It has not welcomed you. But it has taught you how little a person truly needs to keep choosing. A wall, a breath, a sip, a sign, a reason to wait for the next light. Word count 1106. The day softens at the edges now, and the story begins to loosen its grip. You do not need to keep walking. You do not need to solve the whole frozen world. The snow lies quiet beneath the trees, and the ash no longer feels like a warning. Only a soft grey veil settling over branches, stones, and the little shelter that held you through the dark. Your breathing slows. The cold wilderness drifts farther away, becoming an image rather than a test. The spruce trees stand still. The tracks fade gently. The hare is hidden somewhere safe beneath low branches. The fox has gone its careful way. The raven has crossed the pale sky and vanished into morning, and you're no longer alone in the snow. You are here, listening, warm enough, safe enough, held by the ordinary comfort of the room around you. The storm is only a story now. The hunger, is only a memory. The night has passed into history as all nights do, even the longest ones. So let your shoulders loosen. Let your hands grow heavy. Let your thoughts settle like snow on a quiet roof. The wilderness keeps its secrets. The old travellers keep their lessons. The cold stars shine over forests, ships, camps, and forgotten paths, while somewhere far away a small human shelter rests beneath the trees, its branch wall curved against the wind, its signal waiting patiently in the pale light. Nothing more is needed, only breath, only rest, only the slow kind return to warmth. And as the last image fades, imagine the snow smoothing every track, not to erase you, but to tuck the world gently back into silence. The trees lean close. The wind lowers its voice. The night becomes soft. Sleep now quietly and deeply. You have come through the cold. Sweet dreams.